Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of steam and starch, where mornings begin not with birdsong or bliss, but with coal smoke in your nose and a corset at your throat. You're about to live an entire day as a Victorian woman, from the moment your eyelids flutter open to the second your diary closes in secret whispers. You won't believe how much of that day is spent simply pretending. Pretending you're fine. Pretending you're virtuous. Pretending you can breathe. And yes, pretending you don't want to scream into a lace-trimmed pillow. All right, before you get too cozy, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, but only if your heart says yes. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background vibes, and let's chill into tonight's little adventure. You wake up before the sun even considers it. The fire in your bedroom grate has long gone out. Your breath fogs visibly in the air. It's freezing. And no, there is no central heating, just the coal residue in your lungs and the itch of yesterday's stale soot clinging to your sheets. You're not allowed to start your day by pulling the blankets higher. That would delay the inevitable. Somewhere below, a maid, likely younger than you and twice as tired, is stoking the fire, boiling water, and preparing the kettle. You don't envy her, but you don't exactly have the luxury of relaxing either. The bell rings, you ring back, and within minutes she enters with a basin of water that is never quite warm enough, along with your underthings for the day. Chemise, stockings, petticoat, corset. Oh, the corset. It's time. She helps you into the garment as you stand half numb in your shift. You grip the bedpost. She pulls the laces, tighter and tighter. Your ribs compress. Your lungs protest. You feel your heart thump awkwardly under the pressure of a whalebone. But you can't say, enough. There is no such thing as enough tightness. Your silhouette must be immaculate, or else what was the point of being born female in this house? You want to cough, but you don't. It would ruin the moment. Now comes the bustle, literally a puffed rear stuffed with padding to create that elegant S-curve. If you're unlucky, it's been stuffed with horsehair that sheds like mad and clings to your stockings. The maid slides your gown over your head, arranging the sleeves just so. You try not to notice that she hasn't made eye contact all morning. That's part of the dance. If you're of a higher rank, your dress was chosen for you. If you're merely middle class, you still need to pick something appropriate for receiving no one and going nowhere. Because appearances are a full-time job. You glance at the mirror. Do not smile. Do not slouch. The woman in the reflection doesn't look like someone ready to conquer the world. She looks like someone ready to be seen, not heard. That's the goal. Now the gloves. Heaven forbid you handle anything with your bare fingers. You hear footsteps on the stairs. Father, husband, brother, doesn't matter. You must already be composed, seated, and pretending you've been awake for hours. Bonus points if your needlework is strategically placed on your lap like you've been quietly toiling. Breakfast is downstairs, but before that, hair. If you're lucky, your maid is skilled. If you're not, she's creative. Because your hair must be curled, pinned, puffed, or braided, sometimes all three, into something that matches your social rank, age, and marital status. And if you're preparing for a good match, it better whisper desirable, but not desperate. You try to ignore the tugging. The bobby pins bite. Your scalp stings from the previous day's rag curls, twisted overnight in a sleep that wasn't restful. You wince. She says nothing. Neither do you. It's only morning, and already your body's a battlefield of restraint. Steel on your torso, pins in your scalp, a smile plastered where comfort used to live. By the time you stand, dressed and coiffed and barely breathing, you look like a porcelain figure, immaculate, composed, and eerily fragile, and you're still not allowed to eat yet. You descend the stairs as if your joints were made of porcelain, because if you so much as stumble, the sound of a misstep might summon questions. Are you unwell? Have you been out of sorts lately? Is something wrong with your digestion? Or worse, your temperament? In Victorian England, A bruised shin can somehow become a character flaw. Downstairs, the breakfast room smells faintly of overboiled eggs and weak black tea. The men of the house are already seated. Father folds his newspaper deliberately, the rustle signalling that conversation may now begin, but only if you've got the right kind of voice. You're offered a slice of toast, plain. The butter is there, of course, but you'd better not be the first to use it. You say thank you, cut delicately, and chew with purpose. Eating isn't really the point. Looking decorative while you eat? That's the act. If you're married, your husband might remark on the weather. If you're not, the silence stretches. Your role is to observe and smile. Speak only when spoken to. A misplaced comment at breakfast can get you disinvited from dinner. This is the power of mornings in your world. They shape the tone of your entire day. You don't own this house. You curate it with your behaviour. Now, if you're not a lady upstairs but a maid downstairs, the situation flips. Yet somehow gets worse. You're already 3 hours into your day, and your corset, if you have one, is second-hand and sweat-stained. You started with lighting fires across a house that is always too cold, washing linens your own family couldn't afford to soil, and perhaps most painfully, serving food you'll never eat. While the mistress pecks at toast, you're scrubbing the pan it came from. You learn to be invisible, not silent, because you still get orders barked at you all day, but unseen. There's an art to it. Walking without sound, moving before you're noticed, disappearing just in time. And if you're very unlucky, you're what the Victorians called a maid of all work. That's code for no rest. One woman doing the jobs of 3, washing, cleaning, cooking, sewing, tending to children, emptying chamber pots, and all this while dodging the master's eye, which might linger too long if no one's looking. One girl named Lottie once wrote to her sister that she hadn't sat down in 14 hours. Her only reward? A pat of leftover butter and some dry toast eaten in the scullery after dark. And that was a good day. Meanwhile, upstairs again, your breakfast ends. You rise only after the men do, never before. You thank the cook you didn't speak to, and you head back to your room, not to rest, but to recompose yourself. The corset stays on. You don't get to breathe deeply until much later tonight, if ever. On your vanity table lies a small ceramic bowl holding lavender water. You dab it onto your wrists and neck. It doesn't mask the scent of discomfort, but it does let you pretend for a moment that life is gentler than it is. Outside your window, a horse cart rumbles by. Somewhere, a factory whistle blows. A reminder that, even if you don't leave the house, time is moving forward. And so must you. You stand straighter. You check the pins in your hair. You smooth the creases in your dress. Time to start the real part of your day. The part where you smile, nod, and navigate a world that pretends you don't have a mind of your own. You don't get to decide whether you want to do your hair today. That decision was made before you were born. A lady's head is a public sculpture, on display for the hallway mirror, the drawing room guests, the judgmental eyes of an aunt who knows the look of a girl who's letting herself go. After breakfast, you return to your dressing room for what might be the most time-consuming performance of the morning, your hair. If you're wealthy, you sit on a cushioned stool while your maid begins the ritual. She doesn't ask what you'd like. She already knows, because last week you asked for ringlets, and your cousin whispered behind her fan that curls are for fast girls. So today, it's soft braids coiled close to the skull. Elegant, restrained, marriageable. You wince as the brush catches on a knot. She tugs. You pretend not to feel it. You'd think after years of this your scalp would be made of leather, but no. Some mornings it feels like every strand is attached to your soul. And then come the hot tongs. Yes, heated curling irons, heated over a flame, held near your temples, by someone who's had 1 cup of tea and slept 4 hours. You hold your breath while the metal sizzles. It smells like scorched patience and singed hair. But you say nothing, because a well-coiffed head is the closest thing to a weapon you'll carry today. If you're middle class, you're probably doing this yourself. Your arm goes numb holding the iron at the correct angle. You try not to flinch as your own hand betrays you. If you burn your forehead, you'll have to walk around all day pretending it's a beauty mark. And if you're the maid doing the curling, you're not just styling a lady's hair, you're sculpting her future. A loose curl could offend a suitor's mother. A hair out of place could ruin a proposal. No pressure, right? In some households, hair is washed only once a month. Instead, you brush it daily, 100 strokes. That's not just vanity. It's part ritual, part hygiene, part submission. You bend your head, close your eyes, and submit to routine. Victorian ladies often wore pads or hair rats. Yes, that's the real term. Made from their own discarded hair to give volume to buns and braids. You've saved a little pouch of your own fallen strands in a drawer. You're not sure if that's resourceful or vaguely unsettling. Either way, it's what's expected. But here's the real kicker. After an hour of heat, pins, rats, combs, oil, and carefully arranged suffering, your hair must look effortless. Not stiff, not overdone, just naturally perfect, as if you woke up like this and simply happened to look like the ideal woman in every illustrated etiquette book. There's no reward, no applause, just the absence of criticism, which feels, oddly, like a victory. And then, hats. Because once your hair is done, you're required to hide most of it under a bonnet that looks like a cake plate with feathers. If you remove it later, the curls will collapse. If you keep it on, your scalp will sweat. Pick your punishment. You glance at your reflection. It's not you staring back. It's the image of acceptability. A woman whose hair took an hour, and who must now pretend she's just stepping out without effort. Downstairs, a maid is still scrubbing dried wax from yesterday's candlesticks with vinegar and salt. Her hair isn't styled, just tied back tight and low to stay out of the way. If it frizzes or escapes, she'll be scolded for looking wild. And yet, she must never seem vain. You can be dismissed for that too. Meanwhile, you, still upstairs, are deciding between two brooches, or rather, pretending to, because the real decision was made long ago. The simple brooch implies modesty. The ornate one says ambition. Neither of those things are technically wrong, but both are punishable, depending on who you run into today. You settle on the modest one, safer. But now your hair hurts. Not in a poetic way. It literally aches. The pins are stabbing into your scalp. The braids are pulling at the roots. There's a tender spot near your left temple that's been bruised from yesterday's updo. But it's improper to adjust your hair in public. So, if it hurts, you smile. And don't touch. You've learned how to smile with your mouth while keeping your eyebrows still, so as not to disturb the waves at your hairline. This is the unspoken curriculum of girlhood. Stillness, posture, weightlessness, suppression. The more invisible your discomfort, the more visible your virtue. But not every woman is playing the same game. Let's say you're a young shop girl. Your wages barely cover the room you rent in a shared attic space with no window. You've got 10 minutes in the morning to do your hair with water from a shared basin, no mirror and no time. And still, if a lock falls over your forehead during the day, a customer might call you slovenly. Or worse, your male manager might call it inviting. Hair, for you, is a risk. In some factories, women working near machinery had to keep their hair shorn close to the head to avoid getting scalped by belts and wheels. There were cases, gruesome ones, where hair caught and dragged women forward. Those stories are whispered, not printed. But every girl working in a textile mill knows them. They braid tighter, wrap higher, pray harder. Back in the drawing room, you check the clock. You've been at your toilette for nearly 2 hours now. You've burned your scalp, plucked stray hairs, scented your neck, curled and recurled, and pinned your dignity into a shape that will last just long enough to fool a visitor or two. Why? Because how you wear your hair determines how you are remembered. Not just today, but in legacy. Sketches of your profile may be kept in family albums. A painted miniature might show the exact swoop of your fringe. In death, your tresses may be snipped and curled into mourning jewellery, mounted behind glass, worn on a cousin's brooch. Hair isn't vanity. Hair is permanence. And yet you're expected to act like it's nothing. You finally step out of your room, forehead gleaming faintly, neck already stiff. You don't know yet whether you'll be walking, calling, sitting or fainting today, but you do know you'll be doing it while your skull throbs and your hair refuses to move. The day has only just begun. You're ready to be watched. You make your way toward the breakfast room again, not to eat, but to linger, to be seen. It's still morning, but now your presence becomes a performance. The breakfast table has shifted, the men have gone, the newspaper is folded precisely as if never touched. Crumbs are brushed away, the tea is lukewarm, and now, at last, your role begins. You sit with your hands delicately folded. A slice of toast rests on your plate, untouched. You sip a thimble-sized portion of tea and murmur a pleasantry to your mother or chaperone. You're not hungry, not allowed to be. You're available, in the social sense. A well-placed breakfast sighting might lead to an invitation, and an invitation might lead to something better. Security, marriage, stability, or at least fewer questions from Aunt Lydia. There's an order to it all. The bread first, then the egg, then perhaps a bit of kipper, but only if someone else starts first. Everything is choreographed, unspoken, and soaked in silent tension. You're not here to nourish. You're here to prove that you know your place in the hierarchy. If your family is lower middle class, you might actually eat, but quickly, modestly, and in the kitchen. If you're upper middle or gentry, you're supervised by the very furniture. The heavy sideboard watches you. The portrait of your grandmother seems to sneer. And if you're a servant, you serve, you pour the tea, you hold the tray. You stand until your back hurts, and once dismissed, you scurry to the back kitchen for whatever's left. You must not be seen chewing in the hallway. That could cost you your place. Meals aren't about food, they're about structure. Even the table itself reflects this. A long mahogany plank, often with the man at the head and the women along the sides. You're not just sitting, you're placed. Placed in birth order, in beauty order, in usefulness. A less favoured daughter might be seated closer to the wall, it's not overt, but you notice, and God help you if there's a guest. Then it's all fanfare and friction. Your napkin must be folded into your lap before you touch your fork. Your sleeves must be neither too short nor too frilly. Your words must not outshine anyone else's, and your laugh, always one notch below audible. You wonder sometimes if your voice will just dissolve entirely from disuse. Your father, assuming he's present, may comment on the political events in the newspaper. You nod. You sip your tea. You hold a vague opinion about tariffs that sounds pleasant but not aggressive. Your brother may talk about university or business, or his new pocket watch. You say it's lovely. You do not ask questions. A distant cousin might make a snide remark about another woman's dress. You do not defend her, but you store the observation away, like a coin in your social purse. You'll need it later. You're not part of the conversation. You're the ambient music. The only time you speak freely is if a guest remarks on something feminine. Perhaps the floral arrangement. Perhaps the embroidery on the tablecloth. These are safe. These are your arenas. And if you're clever, very clever, you'll learn how to steer whole conversations with the angle of a compliment. Oh, Mrs. Dalloway's gloves were so daring, you might say. And just like that, you've nudged the entire table into a 5-minute discussion on propriety. Well done. You're still starving, of course. But you pretend you're not, because real hunger is vulgar, and wanting more, of anything, is a dangerous thing to let show. Now the meal winds down, and the real sorting begins, not of cutlery, but of futures. The men leave first, as always. Off to important places, banks, offices, clubs. Their footsteps fade down the hall like a privilege you'll never quite be handed. You remain. Perhaps your mother asks you to ring for the tea tray. You rise with practised grace, pull the bell cord, and resume your seat. All this, without raising your voice or your expectations, because now comes the second performance, post-breakfast posturing. If you're unmarried and of age, every glance is a chess move. Your younger sister wears the yellow dress that makes her look far too eager. You don't say anything, but your eyebrows twitch ever so slightly. Mother notices, aren't notices, and just like that your stock rises a fraction of a point. But make no mistake, if you say too much, if you joke too freely, if you show too much charm, you'll be labelled flighty, a bit theatrical, unwise for a wife. One laugh too hearty and suddenly you're the kind of woman who needs a firm hand. It's a razor's edge, so you default to your role as the ideal young lady, poised, pleasant, proper. You ask a servant politely for more tea, even though it's lukewarm and tastes like regret. You compliment your cousin's shawl, even though it scratches your eyes with its brightness. You nod when someone mentions the vicar's sermon, even though you nearly fell asleep in the pew. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, the cook is shouting. The eggs were too runny for Sir, the sausages were overdone for Madam, and now the scullery maid has to hide her blistered hands under her apron. Breakfast lingers for the upper class, but downstairs, it's an ordeal best forgotten as quickly as possible. But up here, in the velvet chairs and the soft rustle of crinoline, everything stretches. You're expected to linger, chat lightly, smile politely at the clock. One girl in your circle, let's call her Eleanor, once dared to excuse herself early after breakfast, citing a headache. A week later, a rumour surfaced. Nervous disposition, they whispered. Poor girl. Might not be up to running a household. She was never invited to that family's picnic again. This is the truth they don't print in etiquette books. You're not only performing to attract a husband, you're performing to keep your place among women. The scrutiny is sharper, the forgiveness thinner. Eventually a calling card arrives, a small, cream-coloured rectangle that holds the weight of your entire afternoon. Someone intends to drop by. Perhaps a neighbour, perhaps a mother of an eligible son, perhaps scandalously a woman who recently returned from the continent and might, heaven forbid, have opinions. Your mother eyes the card. She nods. Your day is no longer your own. You rise, not because you're dismissed, but because it is time to vanish upstairs once more and prepare to be seen again. Your footsteps are silent. Your corset creaks slightly. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the hallway mirror and wonder, not for the first time, if anyone would notice if you simply slipped outside and kept walking. But no, there's toast to nibble, gloves to choose, and a guest to impress. And so you return to your room, not to rest, but to reload. Now let's rewind the morning and step sideways, into a different kind of house. You're still a woman in Victorian England, but there is no breakfast room here. No maid to lace your corset. No faint scent of lavender water. There's only the sharp bite of lye, the hiss of boiling water, and the sting of cracked red fingers submerged in it. Because this time, you're not a lady of the house. You're a laundress, and your day starts before dawn. You rise in a shared cold room where 6 other women sleep in shifts. There's no time to comb your hair or sit at a vanity. Your apron goes on before your boots do. Your hands are already raw from yesterday's soap, but the pile of stained linens hasn't shrunk overnight. It never does. You head straight to the wash house, out back if you're lucky, in a shared alley if you're not. The air is thick with steam and the sour smell of human effort. A neighbour is already hunched over a washtub, her breath forming little clouds of defeat. There's no polite conversation here, no embroidered napkins or polite bites of toast, only grunts, splashes, and the sound of someone cursing under her breath because the soap's run out again. Your job is relentless and invisible, but don't be mistaken, it's also vital. You're responsible for making the wealthier women appear clean, respectable, and sweetly scented. Without you, their gowns would yellow, their reputation would stain, their husbands would notice, and no one must let that happen. So, you scrub. With lye soap that peels the skin from your knuckles, with water so hot it feels alive, with brushes that don't soften with time. The burns on your forearms aren't accidents, they're occupational hazards. And unlike the ladies upstairs who dread breakfast conversation, your dread comes in the form of a hem stained with something you can't identify. Because if it doesn't come out, the housekeeper might dock your pay. Or worse, accuse you of carelessness. And carelessness, in a world where jobs are scarce and references mean everything, is a sentence. You don't work in silence. Around you, other women whisper, groan, even sing in hoarse voices. One jokes that her fingers are starting to look like boiled sausages. Another mutters something about blood on a nightgown. Someone else's secret she's now responsible for bleaching away. It's a sisterhood, but a bitter one. You're too tired to bond, too sore to laugh. By mid-morning your clothes are soaked, your arms are trembling, and your stomach has been reminding you for an hour that it hasn't seen bread since yesterday's crust. But you press on. You wring out heavy sheets that drip onto your boots. You haul water from the pump, each trip feeling like the slow march of time itself. You hang damp linen across sagging ropes, your fingers freezing as they pinch and pin, and maybe, just maybe, you catch a glimpse of a fine lady walking past on the street, gloved and perfumed, her parasol the colour of a fresh peach. You wonder what her hands look like. You wonder if she's ever bled into her bathwater from cracked knuckles. You wonder how it feels to rest. But you don't have time to wonder long. A child has knocked over the soap basin. Your blouse is soaked again, and there's a second load still to be done before the noon bell. You dip your hands back into the water, grit your teeth, and scrub. Because being tired is not a reason to stop. Not for women like you. By noon, the heat in the wash house is unbearable. Your face is flushed, not from embarrassment, but from the scalding air and exertion. The back of your dress is damp. Your corset, if you even own one, is laced loosely, out of necessity, not modesty. You'd remove it entirely if you weren't terrified of being seen undressed by your employer, or some sanctimonious neighbour with an opinion. You glance down at your hands. They're swollen and wrinkled, the nails darkened and chipped. Some laundresses rub lard into their fingertips at night, hoping to soften the cracks before they bleed. It rarely works. One girl in your building, Lucy, lost the tip of her finger to a rusted washtub edge and couldn't work for 3 days. She was evicted on the 4th. So no, you don't complain about the cold, or the heat, or the blood under your nails. You just work faster. Midday brings a change. Not relief, but a shift in rhythm. The clothes are now wrung, rinsed and flapped crisply onto lines or drying racks. But the worst part, the starching and pressing. The starch solution is made of boiled flour or potatoes, depending on what's available, and smells vaguely of rot and desperation. You stir it with a wooden paddle, then drag collars and cuffs through it before drying them flat. Once dry, it's time for the iron. And Victorian irons aren't friendly appliances. They're solid cast iron bricks heated on a stove or coal fire. No temperature control, no forgiveness. You test the heat by spitting on the iron surface to see if it sizzles. You pray it doesn't scorch the fabric or your arm. Many laundresses bear permanent scars on their forearms from accidental brushes with the iron's edge. A moment's distraction can leave a welt that lasts years. And if you burn a customer's item, you may have to repay it from wages you haven't yet earned. But the worst burn isn't on your skin. It's in the pit of your stomach, when you overhear the lady of the house scoff that her washerwoman left streaks again, as if her pristine blouse just grows magically from her wardrobe like a daisy in spring. You don't get credit. You get complaints. You press the sleeve of a fine lawn shirt, knowing full well the man who owns it wouldn't meet your eye if you passed him in the street. He'd look through you like steam, and yet here you are, smoothing the fabric that will rest against his back closer than any kiss. Sometimes, though, strange little gifts fall from pockets. A forgotten coin, a silk ribbon, a pressed flower from a gentleman's letter to a mistress. You never steal, but you remember. You tuck these fragments away in your mind like secrets. They remind you the world above you is built on illusion. The rich pretend to be pure, the poor pretend to be invisible. You've scrubbed the evidence of both. By late afternoon, the work eases, but there's no end, only pause. You still have to sweep the floors, clean the tubs, and drag the now heavy drying linens inside before nightfall. Your back aches, your shoulders slump. You still have to carry a basket up 2 flights of stairs to your rented attic, and you haven't eaten yet. Not really. But for now, you sit on a stool near the door and let the cold air hit your cheeks, and in that 1 minute before the next chore calls, you remember something strange. You're still a woman, not just a washer, not just a body, not just a pair of arms. You're you, even if no one sees it. Even if it washes away each morning like suds down a drain. Back in the warm drawing rooms of the genteel world, you've had your tea, your hair is pinned, and your corset is creaking politely with each inhale. Now comes the part no one writes poems about, the hour of the housewife. Yes, you are technically at home, but you're not idle. You're the silent axis upon which the entire house spins, not because you wield authority openly, no, that would be vulgar, but because everything must move around your orchestrated will, disguised as gentle suggestion. You begin with the household ledger. It rests on your writing desk, bound in worn green leather, and it holds the fates of every servant, supplier, and stray spoon in the house. Your hand cramps as you copy numbers in ink. Meat deliveries, chimney sweeps, new candles, broken chamber pots. Coal again. Always coal. You're not supposed to know numbers, but heaven help the butcher if his invoice is off by half a shilling. You do not call this work, of course. That would be unfeminine. You call it managing the household, a delicate dance of diplomacy, threat, and mental arithmetic with no room for error. And then come the servants. Not all at once. They know better than to crowd. Instead, they filter in with questions and requests. Mrs. Graham the cook wants to know if she may prepare fish on Friday, though it's 2p dearer. Your chambermaid Jane asks, mumbling, if she may change her half-day next week to Thursday. The gardener left a note about the rhubarb. The laundry hasn't arrived yet, and someone has torn the corner of the best tablecloth. You answer them all with the grace of a duchess and the strategy of a general. If you're too kind, the cook will order veal for every dinner. If you're too strict, the maids will mutter behind closed doors, and mutiny is born in whispers. This is your tightrope. You learned it from your mother, who once ruled the linen cupboard like a navy admiral. You remember how she would run her fingers along the edge of a teacup and whisper, "Only women notice what isn't said at the table." So now you inspect the pantry, not because you're hungry, but because mice can get in through spaces you didn't even know existed. And if your sister-in-law visits and finds weevils in the flour, she'll never let you forget it. Downstairs, the staff adjust their tone the moment you enter. The kitchen falls silent when you lift the kettle lid. You pretend not to notice. You're not their friend. You're not their enemy. You're the lady of the house, or at least you're trying very hard to look like one. Sometimes you wish you could complain to someone about how exhausting it is to always be in charge without seeming bossy, about how no one ever praises a smoothly run home, only points out the threadbare towel or crooked curtain, but instead you write a polite note to the fishmonger requesting slightly fresher haddock if available, and you adjust the drawing room curtains by half an inch. Because if the light falls too sharply on the settee, someone might notice the wear in the embroidery. And then, a scandal, a conversation, a judgment, all from the angle of one sunbeam. That's the job. You're both the ruler and the prisoner of this space, and it's barely 11 a.m. The hour stretches. You move through the house with a quiet grace that belies the calculations ticking beneath your silk bodice. There are cushions to be plumped, flowers to be rearranged, and 100 tiny tasks that no one notices until they're done wrong. You straighten the antimacassars on the chairs, not because guests are expected, but because someone might pop in. And if a visitor sees a stain on the upholstery, they'll never sit again without silently judging you. You check the cabinet locks. One is loose. You make a note to send for the carpenter, but not today. It's Tuesday, and Tuesday is for poultry, not for hammering. If you have children, now is the time to check on them, not play with them. That would be odd. You visit the nursery, ask the governess how lessons are going, glance at a half-finished Latin exercise, and murmur something vague like, "Very good, darling," while smoothing a stray curl. You ask the nursemaid if the baby's cough has returned and offer a drop of syrup, though the doctor warned you once against being too maternal. Affection is meant to be supervised. Back downstairs, the scullery maid knocks and delivers the laundry you ordered last week. You open the bundle with a mixture of hope and dread. If a single table napkin is scorched, the laundress will hear about it. You examine the lace trim of your best chemise like a jeweller inspecting for flaws, one frayed thread, and you sigh like it's a national tragedy. Not because you're heartless, but because you are held accountable for it. You, not the woman who spent hours scrubbing it with boiled starch in a tin tub. If your husband finds a missing button on his evening shirt, he won't lecture the maid, he'll look at you. And so you anticipate the flaw before it becomes a complaint. That's your burden. That's your real work. And let's talk about letters. Your morning isn't complete without correspondence. You retreat to your small writing desk, tucked beneath a north-facing window, and open the pile. Invitations to decline politely, thank you notes to send for things you didn't enjoy, and inquiries from charitable societies you're expected to support even though you secretly think they're run by judgmental hypocrites in itchy gloves. You select the best pen, uncork the inkwell, and compose sentences full of words like obliged and most honoured and if convenient. Your handwriting is graceful. Your opinions? Filtered through 7 layers of politeness and social camouflage. You write slowly, carefully, with one eye on the blotting paper and one ear tuned for footsteps, because if someone enters unannounced, you must not appear too engrossed. That would be selfish. Women are not meant to look busy unless it's with embroidery or children. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaks. You pause. Ah, the post has arrived. You scan for foreign stamps, crisp envelopes, anything exciting. But mostly it's repetition. Same names, same paper, same small enclosed lives passed through wax seals. You tuck the letters away, stretch your aching fingers, and glance at the clock. It's nearly midday. Soon the rhythm will shift again. The luncheon tray will appear, and you will be expected to perform your next role. The gracious hostess, the gentle woman of refined tastes, the quiet presence at the edge of a conversation between men who think they run the world. But for now, for 1 minute, the house is still. You close your eyes and imagine a world where no one notices the curtains, where spoons don't matter, where being a woman doesn't mean running a kingdom that pretends it's not a kingdom at all. Then you stand, smooth your skirts, and move on, because you have things to do, and no one will thank you for doing them. The bell rings just past noon, a sharp, silvery chime that slices through the air like a polite summons from the divine. A calling card has arrived. You don't run. That would be unbecoming. But your heart does a small, unladylike leap. You descend the stairs with the calm poise of someone who has practiced this 100 times. Because you have. Calling hours are a ritual, a stage play, a trap. Your gloves are already on. Not the soft ones, those are for intimate company, but the pale kid leather pair with a stitched hem that says, I'm refined but not desperate. Your skirt swishes properly, your waistline is cinched to exactly the degree of social acceptability, and your expression is one of mild, pleasant blankness. You enter the drawing room and find her already seated, Mrs. Audley. Of course, the woman who knows everyone and likes to remind them. She holds her tea like a verdict. You sit, barely allowing your spine to touch the chair, every muscle rehearsed, every finger curved delicately around the handle of your teacup. You smile, not too widely. You nod, not too eagerly. Now it begins, the game of social fencing. Mrs. Audley remarks on the dreadful dampness lately and how it simply ruins one's spirits. You agree, but you mention how it did wonders for your tulips. She raises an eyebrow. Score one for you. Then she leans in. Her voice lowers. A new family has moved into number 7, she whispers, and they've brought a French governess. You gasp just enough to seem intrigued, not scandalized. You sip your tea slowly, letting the gossip linger in the air like perfume. This is the dance. You trade names like currency, observations like knives. You must appear informed but not nosy, amused but never vulgar. You're navigating a minefield in crinoline. On the table between you lies her calling card, ivory with beveled gold edges. It arrived not 5 minutes ago, hand-delivered by a footman in a powdered wig 2 sizes too large. The card is her ticket into your house, but it's also her proof she has been here. Because here's the strange little truth. You leave calling cards even when no one is home. Sometimes especially when no one is home. Why? Because the real game isn't the visit. It's being seen to have visited. It's about the ledger. Yes, you keep one. Every woman does. A small leather-bound volume tucked discreetly in your writing desk. Inside, every name, every card, every call made, received, returned. You must return calls within a fortnight. Failing to do so brands you inattentive, or worse, unfashionable. Your social worth is literally logged, recorded in ink, and reviewed like accounts at a bank. And don't forget the card itself must follow rules. The fold at the corner, that means the call was made in person. Your husband's name scrawled beneath your own, that implies he also visited. An elaborate border, tacky, a cream card with a tasteful monogram. Acceptable. Anything with colour. God forbid. Mrs. Audley rises. She's left behind a faint impression on the settee and a stronger one on your nerves. You smile again, escort her to the door, and thank her as though she brought warmth and meaning into your life instead of passive-aggressive comments about your niece's posture. Once the door shuts, you exhale, but only for a second, because now you must visit someone, lest you fall behind in the delicate web of reciprocal etiquette. You retrieve your own little stack of cards, still pristine in their embossed box, and begin the ritual of choosing who shall receive your presents today. You don't have to say a word. You just leave a card and vanish. You're not building friendships. You're constructing reputation, one card at a time. The carriage rocks gently as you sit primly inside, card case in lap, destination determined. You're not off to tea, you're not going shopping. You're making calls, a term that sounds social, almost friendly, but in practice is more like a military campaign in petticoats. You'll stop at 4 or 5 houses, perhaps more if your gloves stay clean and your posture holds. You won't see anyone, ideally. The perfect call is one where no one is home. You leave your card with the butler and continue down the street with your dignity intact and your hem unsullied. But sometimes, oh no, they are home. The door opens, a servant leads you in, and now you're perched once again on someone else's sofa, sipping someone else's lukewarm tea, complimenting someone else's curtains. Your ankles are crossed just so. Your words must sparkle without piercing. Your tone must be warm without melting into familiarity. And don't speak too much, or too little, or too smart, or too silly. One woman, just last month, mentioned a book she read, an actual novel, and it wasn't by Sir Walter Scott. Scandalous! They still talk about it. Calling is supposed to be brief, 15 minutes ideally, but it stretches depending on the company. You must always be the one to stand first, signalling the end of the visit. Any longer, and you risk appearing too eager. You step out. The footman hands you into the carriage again. You smooth your skirts, check your gloves for lint, and ready the next card. On to number 12. Some women find it thrilling, a way to showcase their gowns, their wit, their social agility. But not you. You feel like a ghost in sunlight, smiling, nodding, complimenting bonnets and pretending the air doesn't taste like anxiety. Because one poorly chosen phrase, one accidental comment about someone's cook or cousin or curtains, and you could be out. Not just out of the room, out of society. It's happened before. Miss Spencer, 2 streets over, dared to ask a gentleman about politics during a call. He was only a cousin. She meant no harm, but within a week her invitation stopped. Her name vanished from dinner lists. She took up beekeeping. You make a note to never mention bees. Sometimes, to liven the calls, women bring small calling gifts. A posy, a new recipe, a ribbon from their last shopping trip. Not for generosity, but for leverage. A little currency to trade for gossip. And oh, the gossip. It flows quietly beneath every call like an underground stream. Mrs. Kent's new maid wears rouge. Lady Hartley's husband is travelling a little too often. Someone heard faint violin music in the attic of number 9, which is odd since they don't own a violin, and that widow in the brown house never removes her gloves. Perhaps they're hiding something, a rash, a tattoo, a scandal. You pretend you don't care. You do. You listen. You remember. Because in this game, your silence is not submission, it's strategy. At last, your rounds are complete. You return home exhausted, wind-blown, and brittle from pretending. You remove your gloves with slow, deliberate care, as if peeling off the person you had to be for the last 2 hours. You drop the card case back in its box. You exhale, and then you take up your own stack of received cards. You note who visited, who didn't, who folded the corner, who forgot your name entirely, and with a tiny dip of your pen, you make a mark beside one, a single dot. A woman to whom you will not return the favour. She won't know it yet, but her place in your world just vanished, without a word. By the time you return from your calls, the drawing room is quiet again, the air faintly stale with the perfume of earlier visitors and the residue of polite conversation. Now comes the hour of domestic virtue, needlework. Not because something truly needs mending, but because a woman must appear industrious at all times. God forbid anyone think you are idle, so you sit by the window, sunlight pooling onto your lap, and lift your embroidery hoop. You've already begun a floral sampler, though it's hard to tell the violets from the forget-me-nots. They've both been sewn with the same expression of weary purpose. You thread the needle, your fingers still sore from earlier letter writing. You wish, absurdly, for something to unravel, just so you could repair it. A task with a beginning and an end, a sense of progress. But this isn't about completion, it's about presence. Proof that your hands are gentle, your time is valuable, and your purpose is decorative but disciplined. Every stitch you make is a stitch of virtue. Needlework isn't a hobby, it's evidence of your morality. If your cousin arrives unexpectedly, you will be seen with hoop in hand and eyes modestly lowered. If your mother-in-law drops in, she'll find you darning socks you've already darned 3 times over. If your husband appears, he'll see you producing something delicate, quiet, feminine, everything a Victorian wife is supposed to be. Sometimes, other women come to sit and sew too. A small circle of skirts and sighs, each needle dancing through cloth while the mouths whisper their own threads of scandal, worry, envy, and dreams. I hear Mrs. Grafton's daughter is courting a curate, one says, stabbing the linen just a bit too forcefully. Curates don't pay, another sniffs. She'll be living on boiled potatoes and God's good favour. They laugh. Quietly, of course. But there's something else beneath the sound. Relief. That this time, the gossip isn't about you. Needlework is a shield. You hide behind it. You disappear into it. And it hides you too. From questions, from loneliness, from the creeping sense that none of this thread, none of this lace, none of this labour will ever truly belong to you. But even here, there are rules. You may embroider pillowcases, handkerchiefs, chair cushions, but not anything too fine. You mustn't outshine the work of the servants. And don't attempt anything overtly original. A rose is lovely. A bird, acceptable. But an owl with spectacles or a woman on a bicycle, that's eccentric. That's dangerous. You remember the story of a girl who stitched a picture of a woman standing alone holding a sword. They say her father burned it. So you stitch a daisy instead, because a daisy is safe. Somewhere nearby, a governess corrects a child's Latin declension. She too holds her own kind of needlework, shaping minds that will never remember her name. She's unmarried, invisible. The other women don't ask her to join them, not out of cruelty, but out of caution. She's neither servant nor lady, neither threat nor comfort. Her mere presence reminds you what happens when you fall between the cracks of class. You bend closer to your needle point, a tiny prick on your finger. A bead of blood blooms against the fabric. You blot it quickly. No one saw. You resume your stitches, pretending it didn't happen. That's what Victorian women do best. By now, your hands move without thought. In, out, pull. The rhythm of the needle has numbed your thoughts into a strange, floaty quiet. That's the dangerous part. When your hands are busy but your mind wanders, that's when the daydreams begin. You imagine tossing the hoop aside and walking straight out the door, or perhaps sewing something wildly inappropriate. A mermaid, a pistol, a grinning fox, something alive. something that would make the aunties gasp into their teacups, but instead you thread another pale blue strand. Because you know what this embroidery circle really is. Not a pastime, but a surveillance system. A genteel one, embroidered with roses and edged with doilies, but surveillance all the same. Every woman in the room knows how to smile while evaluating your cuffs, how to ask how your mother is while checking the state of your hem. They notice if your stitching is too slow. They notice if you blink too much. They notice the way your eyes flick toward the window, as if you're waiting for something, or someone. You keep your gaze fixed on the hoop. The truth is, needlework is one of the few things you can do. You cannot own property. You cannot vote. You cannot enter a gentleman's club, or speak at a town meeting, or walk alone at night. But you can sew 12 tiny roses onto a scrap of linen and be congratulated for it. You can mend your husband's handkerchief and be called useful. You can labour for hours in silence and be praised for your serenity. That's the great irony of it all. In a society obsessed with keeping women quiet, needlework becomes both the symbol of obedience and the only place where women speak freely. Not in words, always, but in glances, in pauses, in the stories shared under the soft sound of thread sliding through cloth. "Did you hear about Miss Halford?" one woman asks, eyes lowered. "Ran off with a man from the theatre, I heard," someone murmurs. "Not married," another whispers. A tiny shake of the head, a sharp inhale, a collective beat of silence, equal parts horror and thrill. And then, business as usual. Another stitch, another story half told. Sometimes the gossip loops back to you. You feel it circling the room like a draft. You were seen at the bakery. You were overheard saying something spirited. Someone noticed you reading a novel, alone, in public. You stitch faster. You think of your great-aunt who once said that a woman's character could be judged by her buttonholes. You laughed at the time. You thought it a joke. You know better now. In another corner of society, behind closed doors and soot-streaked windows, other women are stitching too. Seamstresses bent over their workbenches, fingers raw from needles, spines permanently curved from crouching. They don't have parlours. They don't have cushions. But they make your gowns. They hem your sleeves. They give form to the fashion you will be judged by. You wonder if their needle slips when they're tired, if they ever cry into the seams. You wonder if they stitch, like you do, in silence, but dream loudly. The sun has shifted now. Your hoop casts a perfect circle of shadow on your skirts. Someone offers to ring for tea. Another woman says she must go. Her daughter is due home from school. The circle breaks up. You roll your work into a neat little bundle and tuck it into your sewing basket. You rise, your knees stiff, and you smile. The daisy is finished. Tomorrow you'll start another one, because needlework never ends, and neither does the performance. The garden path crunches beneath your boots. Gravel carefully raked into gentle arcs by a gardener you've never formally met, though you pass him twice a week. You walk with purpose, but never speed, never haste. Everything about you must suggest leisure, even if your mind is calculating your next 10 moves like a chessboard built of hydrangeas and veiled judgment. The other women stroll beside you in delicate pairs, parasols tilted just so. Their cheeks are pink, not from exertion, but from the expectation of vitality. The sunlight glances off your bonnet. You nod when someone points out the roses. You comment on the box hedges. You do not mention that your stays are cutting into your ribs. This is not a walk for pleasure. This is a promenade, a mobile audition. For whom? It depends. If you're unmarried, it's a march across a battlefield, dressed like a bride, hoping no one notices the metaphor. If you're married, it's a reaffirmation of your status, a visual announcement that you're still graceful, still in command, still worthy of your place on the path. But if you're watching, if you're one of the mothers or aunts or chaperones, you're looking for posture, for potential, for danger signs. A glance too long between young people, a laugh too sincere, heaven forbid, an accidental brush of sleeves, that could spiral into talk, and talk becomes suspicion, and suspicion, well, you remember how quickly Miss Linton disappeared from the social calendar, so you smile, you walk, You avoid puddles and scandal. Even the very act of walking is governed. You never go out alone. That would mark you as improper, or worse, as available. No respectable woman walks without a companion unless she's desperate or disgraced. And as for exercise, don't be ridiculous. This isn't exercise. It's posture practice with scenery. Your corset prevents any actual exertion. Your skirt weighs several pounds, and if you sweat, even slightly, it must be from the heat, not from effort. You must never be out of breath, even if your lungs are quietly screaming for room to expand. This is the Victorian version of fresh air. The same air, by the way, that's filled with coal dust and chimney soot. But if it blows through a rose bush and a wrought iron gate, then somehow it's healthy. As you round the garden bend, you catch sight of the vicar's wife approaching. She's always walking, always by chance where you happen to be. She greets you with the force of someone who plans to know everything you've ever thought, said, or eaten. You curtsy. She curtsies. It's war disguised as courtesy. She comments on your gloves, again, and you thank her. You know she's really asking if you've seen the latest fashion plates. You have. You chose not to follow them. She knows that too. A little ahead, two girls, 16, 17 no more, are giggling beneath their parasols. Their whispers float backward. One of them glances at you quickly. You remember when you were their age, when you thought the garden was a secret, not a stage. You pass them with a nod and a smile that says, "Careful, dears." They don't understand yet, they will. Because this walk is not just a walk, it's a test. Are your shoes clean? Are your hemlines the right length? Do you know where to place your hands when you pause by the lily pond? Do you step gracefully over the root, or does your boot catch and betray your nerves? Everything is watched, especially by the men who aren't here, because word will get back to them about your walk, your dress, your laugh, and maybe, just maybe, that will determine whether or not you get a dance card next Saturday, or an invitation at all. The stroll is supposed to calm the nerves, that's what the magazines say. A healthy constitutional, they call it, invigorating for the mind and complexion. But your boots are pinching, your corset is creaking with each careful breath, and your parasol is more of a shoulder cramp than a sunshield. Still you walk, because not walking would say more than anything you could utter aloud. Ahead, a group of women slow near the stone bench by the lilacs. You know what's coming. The pivot, the assessment, the implied comparisons. You pause with them as required. Someone mentions a charity fair. Someone else sighs about a cousin's child who has developed a rather unfortunate fondness for novels written by women. The collective gasp is soft and synchronized. You nod along, careful to neither sound approving nor dismissive. You rest your parasol tip down, your gloves arranged just so on the handle. Your face is a pleasant watercolour of attentiveness. A widow in black murmurs something sharp about how young ladies today walk with too much swing in the hips. Everyone titters. You smile gently and reposition your feet, because even your gait is fair game. The idea, of course, is that you're simply enjoying the garden, admiring the asters, sniffing at the peonies, letting your cheeks pink naturally in the sun. But everyone knows the truth. This is a parade of eligibility, a living catalogue of feminine poise. The older women are watching for signs of rebellion. The younger women are watching each other, and somewhere behind an upper window, perhaps even your own mother is watching too, taking mental notes for that evening's fireside report. The garden path loops you back toward the side entrance. You walk slower now, as if by dragging the moment out you can avoid returning to the performance inside. But the gravel ends. The stone steps begin. You ascend like a performer exiting the stage. Your fingers brush the banister. You step through the threshold into the shaded hall, where your body can finally relax a little. Behind you, the maid closes the door. You allow yourself one brief, private sigh, and then you recompose. Again. Because the drawing room awaits and you're expected to appear as if you've just floated in on a warm breeze. But before you rejoin the others, you pause in the hall and glance at your reflection in the mirror. There you are, bonnet slightly askew, cheeks a little too flushed, a wisp of hair daring to escape your carefully pinned coiffure. You smooth it back into place, not because you mind the chaos, but because someone else would, and their opinion matters more than your comfort, just like everything else. In another world, one street over, a factory girl trudges through mud, shoulders hunched, skirts damp to the knees. No parasol, no gravel path, no judgment, at least not the kind that follows you into dinner parties. She walks fast. No one cares how her boots look when she arrives. But you're not allowed to arrive, only to appear, as if you were always already there. Perfect, light-footed, flawless. Back in the drawing room, someone hands you a glass of lemonade. You sip, you nod, you compliment a dress you find hideous, and you sit once more in your favourite chair, your posture straight, your ankles crossed, and prepare for the next scene. The afternoon isn't over, and neither is the show. The garden path crunches beneath your boots, gravel carefully raked into gentle arcs by a gardener you've never formally met, though you pass him twice a week. You walk with purpose, but never speed, never haste. Everything about you must suggest leisure, even if your mind is calculating your next 10 moves like a chessboard built of hydrangeas and veiled judgment. The other women stroll beside you in delicate pairs, parasols tilted just so. Their cheeks are pink, not from exertion, but from the expectation of vitality. The sunlight glances off your bonnet. You nod when someone points out the roses. You comment on the box hedges. You do not mention that your stays are cutting into your ribs. This is not a walk for pleasure. This is a promenade, a mobile audition. For whom? It depends. If you're unmarried, it's a march across a battlefield, dressed like a bride, hoping no one notices the metaphor. If you're married, it's a reaffirmation of your status, a visual announcement that you're still graceful, still in command, still worthy of your place on the path. But if you're watching, if you're one of the mothers or aunts or chaperones, you're looking for posture, for potential, for danger signs. A glance too long between young people, a laugh too sincere. Heaven forbid, an accidental brush of sleeves. That could spiral into talk, and talk becomes suspicion, and suspicion. Well, you remember how quickly Miss Linton disappeared from the social calendar, so you smile, you walk, you avoid puddles and scandal. Even the very act of walking is governed. You never go out alone. That would mark you as improper, or worse, as available. No respectable woman walks without a companion unless she's desperate or disgraced. And as for exercise, don't be ridiculous. This isn't exercise. It's posture practice with scenery. Your corset prevents any actual exertion. Your skirt weighs several pounds, and if you sweat, even slightly, it must be from the heat, not from effort. You must never be out of breath, even if your lungs are quietly screaming for room to expand. This is the Victorian version of fresh air. The same air, by the way, that's filled with coal dust and chimney soot. But if it blows through a rose bush and a wrought iron gate, then somehow it's healthy. As you round the garden bend, you catch sight of the vicar's wife approaching. She's always walking, always by chance where you happen to be. She greets you with the force of someone who plans to know everything you've ever thought, said, or eaten. You curtsy. She curtsies. It's war disguised as courtesy. She comments on your gloves, again, and you thank her. You know she's really asking if you've seen the latest fashion plates. You have. You chose not to follow them. She knows that too. A little ahead, 2 girls, 16, 17 no more, are giggling beneath their parasols. Their whispers float backward. One of them glances at you quickly. You remember when you were their age, when you thought the garden was a secret, not a stage. You pass them with a nod and a smile that says, "Careful, dears. They don't understand yet, they will. Because this walk is not just a walk, it's a test. Are your shoes clean? Are your hemlines the right length? Do you know where to place your hands when you pause by the lily pond? Do you step gracefully over the root, or does your boot catch and betray your nerves? Everything is watched, especially by the men who aren't here, because word will get back to them about your walk, your dress, your laugh, and maybe, just maybe, that will determine whether or not you get a dance card next Saturday, or an invitation at all. The stroll is supposed to calm the nerves, that's what the magazines say. A healthy constitutional, they call it, invigorating for the mind and complexion. But your boots are pinching, your corset is creaking with each careful breath, and your parasol is more of a shoulder cramp than a sunshield. Still, you walk, because not walking would say more than anything you could utter aloud. Ahead, a group of women slow near the stone bench by the lilacs. You know what's coming, the pivot, the assessment, the implied comparisons. You pause with them as required. Someone mentions a charity fair. Someone else sighs about a cousin's child who has developed a rather unfortunate fondness for novels written by women. The collective gasp is soft and synchronized. You nod along, careful to neither sound approving nor dismissive. You rest your parasol tip down, your gloves arranged just so on the handle. Your face is a pleasant watercolour of attentiveness. A widow in black murmurs something sharp about how young ladies today walk with too much swing in the hips. Everyone titters. You smile gently and reposition your feet, because even your gait is fair game. The idea, of course, is that you're simply enjoying the garden, admiring the asters, sniffing at the peonies, letting your cheeks pink naturally in the sun. But everyone knows the truth. This is a parade of eligibility, a living catalogue of feminine poise. The older women are watching for signs of rebellion. The younger women are watching each other, and somewhere behind an upper window, perhaps even your own mother is watching too, taking mental notes for that evening's fireside report. The garden path loops you back toward the side entrance. You walk slower now, as if by dragging the moment out, you can avoid returning to the performance inside. But the gravel ends. The stone steps begin. You ascend like a performer exiting the stage. Your fingers brush the banister. You step through the threshold into the shaded hall where your body can finally relax a little. Behind you, the maid closes the door. You allow yourself one brief, private sigh, and then you recompose again. Because the drawing room awaits, and you're expected to appear as if you've just floated in on a warm breeze. But before you rejoin the others, you pause in the hall and glance at your reflection in the mirror. There you are. Bonnet slightly askew, cheeks a little too flushed, a wisp of hair daring to escape your carefully pinned coiffure. You smooth it back into place, not because you mind the chaos, but because someone else would, and their opinion matters more than your comfort, just like everything else. In another world, one street over, a factory girl trudges through mud, shoulders hunched, skirts damp to the knees. No parasol, no gravel path, no judgment, at least not the kind that follows you into dinner parties. She walks fast. No one cares how her boots look when she arrives. But you're not allowed to arrive, only to appear, as if you were always already there. Perfect, light-footed, flawless. Back in the drawing room, someone hands you a glass of lemonade. You sip, you nod, you compliment a dress you find hideous, and you sit once more in your favourite chair, your posture straight, your ankles crossed, and prepare for the next scene. The afternoon isn't over, and neither is the show. The afternoon sun slants across the carpet now, long and golden and just a little too warm. The house is quiet in that particular Victorian way, so quiet it becomes heavy. A silence made of ticking clocks, distant footsteps, the occasional clink of porcelain from the pantry. You settle yourself on the settee with a book, not because you're desperate to read, but because reading, when done correctly, makes you look intelligent, refined, contemplative, and safely non-threatening. The book in your hands is poetry. It must be. Novels are frowned upon in some circles, especially the modern ones full of passion, independence, and, heaven forbid, women with opinions. Poetry is safer, especially when it rhymes. You hold the volume open just far enough for the gold leaf edges to catch the light. You turn the pages slowly, reverently. You read the same stanza 4 times because your eyes keep drifting, not to the words, but to the sound of a door closing upstairs, or a footstep that makes you wonder who might be arriving unannounced. You try to focus. The poem is about a lark, or perhaps it's a brook, something gently tragic, Your posture is excellent. If someone walks into the room, they'll see a young lady immersed in elevated thought. Not a woman bored to the marrow. You don't shift your legs. You don't prop your chin in your hand. That would be too casual. No, you must look like a portrait. All soft edges and serenity. And that's the maddening part. You're not reading to escape. You're reading to perform escape. And ironically, there are rules even for this. One hand beneath the book, the other lightly touching the edge of the page, head tilted, lips faintly parted. You're meant to look like a painting that might one day hang in the hallway of a cousin's estate. Portrait of a lady in leisure. The tragedy is, you are not at leisure. You are at work, constantly. Even in this moment of supposed peace, you are labouring beneath layers of expectation. Because reading is acceptable, yes, but only if it's not too loud, too fast, too frequent. A girl who reads too much is suspect. A girl who quotes her books at the dinner table is marked. A girl who questions the content of her reading. Dangerous. There's a story of a young woman who once read Darwin and then asked a clergyman about it during a tea. She was sent to stay with an aunt in the north, indefinitely. You keep that story folded up in your mind like a pressed flower between pages, a reminder. Your finger rests on a line about longing. You don't dare feel it too deeply. Instead, you memorize it, so that later, when someone asks what you're reading, you can quote something tasteful, something vague, something that sounds as if you were thinking about birds and not about the cage you sit in. At the far end of the drawing room, your mother rustles through embroidery silks. She doesn't interrupt you. That would be impolite. But she glances up occasionally, checking to see what page you're on. Too fast and she'll worry about your mind. Too slow and she'll worry about your dullness. This is the impossible tightrope. To read enough to appear intelligent, but never enough to appear hungry. You shift your focus back to the book. The page has turned, but you don't remember what it said. As the sun dips lower, slanting lines of light across the wallpaper, you finally lower the book. Not because you've finished it, but because you've been holding it long enough to make a statement. Any longer, and someone might think you actually enjoy reading, which is unsettling. You place the book just so on the side table, cover up, spine aligned, as if it too is part of the furniture. Then you rise, gracefully, slowly. You stretch, but only in the way a lady is permitted to stretch, subtly, with a tilt of the neck and a roll of the shoulders, like a swan rearranging its wings. Your legs are stiff. Your corset groans softly as you shift your weight. You want to yawn, but you swallow it down. Reading, after all, is tiring, but it's nothing compared to what happens when you forget to do it. There was a girl, Eliza, you think her name was, who never developed a taste for reading, or at least never pretended to. She preferred walking in the garden, sketching birds, writing little poems in private. That might have been charming if she hadn't once said aloud that she found Wordsworth dull. She's married now, to a man 20 years her senior who owns a brewery and hates dogs. You wonder if she still writes poems. Reading is, in some ways, your armour. You think of the governess, upstairs now, perhaps reading too, but without the cushion, the parlour, the peace. She reads at night, in the tiny hour between correcting a child's handwriting and darning her own hem. Her books are borrowed, often returned with pages missing. No one praises her for reading. They expect it. Her reading isn't ornamental, it's escape. You envy her a little for that. There's something dangerous about reading for meaning. You felt it, once, quietly, when a sentence snagged something inside you, a passage that made you feel seen. That felt like it had been written by someone peering through time, straight into your own ribcage. But you folded the page gently, closed the book, and tucked it away. Because letting a book change you is as perilous as letting a corset slip undone in public. No one wants to see a woman undone. Not really. So instead, you collect little quotes, snippets, safe bits of poetry you can offer at gatherings, a line about the moon, a metaphor about flowers, nothing that could ever be misconstrued as desire or discontent. Even your books are curated for the drawing room. Your father once gifted you a volume of Milton with a note that said, "Strong minds need strong verse." You read 3 pages and wept. Not because of the words, but because of the moment. He saw you, briefly. Then he never mentioned it again. Now you mostly read what is expected, what is beautiful, what will look appropriate left on the piano bench. But sometimes, when no one's watching, you return to the pages that feel dangerous, the ones with angry women, or lonely ones, or clever ones who ask questions that echo long after the book is shut. You never say their names aloud. You just keep them folded into your memory, like a secret pressed between your gloves. Because books may be bound, but you're not as tightly stitched together as they think. Not yet. Upstairs, just past the second landing where the air grows cooler and the wallpaper peels slightly at the corners, lives a woman who dines alone, sleeps alone, and smiles only when the children get their French conjugations correct. She is the governess, and today let's step into her shoes, or rather, her stiff, sensible boots. You walk the corridor to her room, tucked near the nursery but never in it. Close enough to be summoned, far enough to be separate. That word, separate, defines her life. You enter her space. It is small, ordered, a room of modest possessions and quiet pride. There's a writing desk with 3 books stacked neatly, grammar, geography, and something half read and secretly treasured. There's a trunk under the bed. She's had it since she was 16. Her gown is dark, plain, made to blend, and so is she. As the governess, you exist in a strange limbo. Not a servant, yet not a lady. Not paid enough to live well, not quite accepted enough to marry up. You eat with the children, not with the family. You teach manners you're not allowed to use. You attend church but sit at the back. You listen at the dinner parties but only through the walls. In short, you're indispensable and invisible. You rise early, before the nursemaid, before the first bell. You dress quickly. No corsets, no layers of silk, just wool and cotton and practicality. You brush your own hair, tie it back and start the day with sums. Your pupils are lovely sometimes, other times monsters in lace. They pinch, they lie, they declare boredom after 5 minutes of spelling, but you endure it, because you are being judged too. If a child misbehaves, it's your fault. If they miss a lesson, it's your negligence. If they fall behind in Latin, you're not up to standard. And yet, when the child recites a flawless passage from Julius Caesar at dinner, no one praises you. They praise the child. The father beams, the mother dabs her eyes. You remain in the shadows. You correct the next exercise silently. At midday, you escort the children into the garden, but not for leisure. This is object learning. They must name 5 trees and 3 birds before they are allowed to run. One of them falls in the mud. You scrub their boots later. You don't sigh. You don't snap. You smile. That careful governess smile that says, "I am not here to disrupt. I am only here to help." But you are tired. Not from the work, but from the balancing act. The daily, hourly effort to be serious but not cold. Intelligent but not intimidating, nurturing but not maternal. Because if you become too attached to the children, that's inappropriate. If you become too distant, that's heartless. One governess in Hampshire was dismissed for holding a child's hand too long, another for refusing to. You finish the morning lessons in the nursery. The older child yawns. The younger chews a blotter. You resist the urge to scream. You ask them to recite their poetry again. They moan. But you press on, because you are expected to be a fortress of patience, and you must be good, or you'll be gone. Afternoon lessons drag on like wet wool. The children are restless now, fidgeting, poking each other with quills, inventing excuses to leave the room. You assign handwriting practice just so you can sit down for 5 blessed minutes. You glance at the mantel clock. It's barely past 2. You haven't spoken to another adult since breakfast, and even that was just the butler grunting that the fire was low. This is what no one tells you about being a governess. It's not the work that breaks you. It's the isolation. You're surrounded by people all day, yet you are alone. You're not part of the family. You're not part of the staff. You're a ghost in the corridor, acknowledged only when needed, and otherwise ignored like a misplaced vase. At dinner, you eat alone, in your room, on a tray, a slice of cold meat, a heel of bread, sometimes soup. You're not meant to dine with the family, lest you blur the line. But you're also not permitted to join the servants. They think you look down on them. Maybe you do, a little, but mostly because you're afraid they might be right when they laugh behind your back and call you a pretend lady. There's no place for you, not really. And because you are educated, and you must be, to teach, you feel the absence of companionship like a physical ache. No one to discuss ideas with, no one to share books with, no one who cares that you once translated Virgil or memorised half of Shakespeare's sonnets. Sometimes, when the children nap or run off for their music lessons, you take out your secret book, the one you keep hidden beneath your mending basket. Today it's a novel. Tomorrow it might be a volume of essays, something with teeth, something that reminds you you're still alive. You read by the window, eyes darting upward every few minutes to make sure no one sees. A governess caught absorbed in fiction can be dismissed for inappropriate indulgence. That actually happened to a woman you knew. Her only sin was reading Jane Eyre. The irony nearly killed her. Once, a guest at the house asked you what you thought of the Reform Bill. You answered honestly, too honestly. He smiled, but you noticed the frost in the lady's eyes afterward. No one's asked your opinion since, so now you speak only when necessary. You keep your lessons polite and bland. You compliment the children's mediocre drawings. You praise their recitations even when they stumble. You say yes, miss, and no, sir, and that will be quite suitable. You've learned to make yourself smaller, quieter, so that you're never mistaken for a threat. And yet, you still dream, not of grand things, not of balls or titles, just of being seen, of someone asking how your day was and actually listening to the answer, of eating at a table where someone pours your tea, of being allowed to laugh, loudly. Not the careful little cough of amusement you use now, but a full free laugh. You tuck the book away. The children are returning from their music lesson. You straighten your collar. You smile. And just before they burst in, you allow yourself a final thought. You are not the heroine of this household. You're not even a side character. You're the margin note, the silent presence, the hand that shapes the next generation, but is never written into the story. Still, you hold your pen. Still, you teach. Still, you stay. Because for some women, being near the fire, even on its outermost edge, is better than freezing in the dark. There's a peculiar stillness that settles into the late Victorian afternoon, the kind that makes the ticking clock feel louder, the sunlight feel thinner, and your own skin feel just a little too tight. It's the hour where respectable women are supposed to be at ease, but you're wilting. You sit in a chair that's slightly too upright, wearing clothes slightly too tight, in a life slightly too scripted. And there's no polite way to say this, but you feel off, not ill, not entirely well, something in between, a little faint, a little tired, a little nervous. That word again. Nerves. The catch-all term for every quiet misery a woman must politely swallow. You glance down at your hands, perfectly still. You fold them in your lap and wonder quietly if they'll betray you. Twitch, tremble, give you away. It's the corset, you tell yourself. You haven't drawn a full breath in 5 hours. Or maybe it's the heat, or the way your stays have pressed into the base of your spine and made your head feel oddly floaty. And yet, you won't loosen anything. Because to do so would admit weakness, and weakness invites attention. And attention, in this world, is dangerous. So you sit up straighter and pretend not to hear the buzzing behind your eyes. In the corner of the room, Aunt Margaret sighs. "Oh, poor dear," she murmurs. "You look quite peaked. Perhaps a little rest?" You nod. She rings for tea and advises a tonic, something bitter and brown with a smell like furniture polish. You sip it. It does nothing, except confirm to everyone else in the room that you're behaving appropriately. After all, Victorian women aren't supposed to feel rage, or restlessness, or despair. But a fainting spell? That's allowed. That's practically fashionable. It's even expected. You've heard of women who keep a fainting couch near every window, of women who retreat to their rooms with nerves and remain there until dinner, returning paler and quieter and somehow even more marriageable. You wonder if you're becoming one of them, or worse, becoming known as one of them. It starts with one headache, one moment of dizziness at a musical recital. Then someone mentions it to the vicar's wife, then someone else. Before you know it, people start offering to carry your packages, pull out your chair, invite your younger sister on walks instead of you, and then you're the fragile one. Which wouldn't be so bad, except fragility in a woman is like a rose left out overnight. At first it's charming, then it's wilted, then it's discarded. So you try to not faint, to not shake, to smile through the weight on your chest and pretend it's just your bodice sitting wrong. You try to remember who you were before the sighs started, before the word nervous crept into your mother's letters, before the doctor with the slick hair and pale hands began stopping by after church, just to check. You know what he'll say if this gets worse. You've heard it whispered at garden parties. Hysteria. That word, all sharp consonants and sharper consequences. Because hysteria is more than a diagnosis. It's a sentence. To isolation, to ridicule, to ice baths and mustard plasters, and a little room at the end of the hall where women go to get better and never quite return the same. And so, you do what all women like you are taught to do. You mask it, you lace tighter, smile wider, speak softer, and when no one's looking, you dig your nails into your palm, not to hurt, just to feel something solid. It's afternoon, the air is thick, you're still. But your mind is thrashing, and no one, not even you, can name what it is you're drowning in. By late afternoon, the dizziness turns into something else, a fluttering in your chest, as if a trapped bird is beating against your ribs. You rise from the chair, hoping movement will help, but the room seems to tilt ever so slightly. The wallpaper feels too close, the air too heavy. Someone notices, of course. They always do. Mrs. Pembroke, who lives 3 streets over and is visiting today, gasps with a sort of delighted horror. "Oh, my dear, you are pale! Sit, quickly!" And just like that, you've become the event of the afternoon. The maid rushes for smelling salts. Aunt Margaret fans you with a copy of the Ladies' Journal. A cousin hovers, suggesting cool water. It's not that they want you unwell, but your faintness gives them something to do, something to talk about, something to feel useful about. You try to insist that you're fine, that it's only the weather, or perhaps the excitement of the day. But they've already decided. You've had an episode, a nervous turn, a moment. That word again, moment. In this world it can ruin or rescue you. A moment makes you interesting, vulnerable, softened. The kind of woman men feel compelled to protect and women feel compelled to discuss. You breathe shallowly as the smelling salts burn your nose. The ammonia stings, sharp enough to make your eyes water. You cough once, then twice. Everyone relaxes. "There now," says Mrs. Pembroke with the tone of someone who's just won at patience. "All better. All better." 2 words that mean absolutely nothing. They talk for a few more minutes, softly now, as if you might break if the conversation gets too loud. You nod, smile faintly, and accept the offer of a biscuit. You're now officially delicate. That's a reputation that sticks like damp lace. By tomorrow the story will travel. "Did you hear? Poor thing nearly fainted again. Such nerves, such sensitivity." Your name will hover in parlours, paired with adjectives like sweet, frail, and melancholic. You sip your tea in silence, already feeling smaller. But there's another truth humming beneath this charade, a quieter, crueler one. Victorian doctors have made women's pain into poetry. They call your exhaustion a feminine temperament, your migraines, overexcitement of the imagination. your palpitations, an excess of emotion. They've even invented machines, small, humming, whirring contraptions, to relieve hysteria in their female patients. No one calls that madness, of course. That's treatment. You sit very still, letting the tea go cold in your hand. You can't quite decide what's worse, that you've become a symptom, or that you're expected to make it look beautiful. From now on, you'll be told to rest, not to walk too briskly, not to read too much, not to let your thoughts run wild, as if your mind were an animal to be kept in a cage. But you know the truth. Your thoughts are all you have left, so you keep them, quietly, carefully. You write them down in the small leather notebook hidden inside your writing desk, the one wrapped in ribbon and tied tight. Your secret rebellion, your invisible pulse. The next time someone says, "You poor dear, your nerves," you'll nod. You'll even thank them, but inside you'll think of that trapped bird in your chest, and you'll smile, because it's still alive, and so are you. Evening begins not with sunset, but with steam. You've made it through the long hours of quiet panic and soft judgments. Now it's time for the grand illusion of rest. If you're fortunate or unfortunate enough to be part of the wealthier set, you are summoned for your evening toilette. Your maid enters, arms full of warm towels and glass bottles filled with mystery. The air fills with lavender water, ammonia, and just the faintest trace of desperation. You sit stiffly in front of the dressing mirror. She begins with your hair, brushing out the curls, retwisting the plaits, gently teasing the pins free from your tender scalp. You wince only once. She pretends not to notice. Then comes the face wash. Not soap, not anything simple. Instead, cold cream made with whale oil, toner with alcohol and astringent, rose water, if you're lucky. But some households insist on arsenic. Yes, arsenic. Just a few drops in a lotion, applied to bleach the skin. Pale means pure. Pale means untouched. Pale means marriageable. Never mind that it eats away at the outer layers of your skin. Never mind that it stings. Your cheeks must not glow. They must glimmer. And so, you apply it. Not because you're vain, but because your entire value might depend on how translucent the skin over your cheekbone appears by candlelight at dinner. Your lashes are darkened, not with mascara, which doesn't exist yet, but with lampblack, a powder made from soot, mixed with a bit of saliva, applied with a fingertip, gently. Your lips, pinched, not painted. That would be scandalous. But a discreet bite before entering the drawing room gives them just enough colour to suggest health, not hunger. Your gown for the evening is already laid out on the bed. Silk, structured, low-necked, but not daring. The kind of dress that whispers wealth without screaming seduction. You slip into it with practiced ease. The maid fastens the hooks up your back. You stretch your arms, just enough to feel the tight pull of fabric along your spine. Your trust, poised, transformed. By the time you descend the stairs for dinner, you're a different creature entirely. Gone is the pale girl with the fluttering heart and fainting spells. In her place stands a vision, serene, composed, fragrant, gleaming ever so slightly with castor oil and powdered starch. You float into the drawing room as though you've never known a single moment of discomfort. That's the expectation, because this is the time of night when women become ornament. You will not pour the wine, you will not serve the food, you will not initiate the conversation. You will, however, provide atmosphere. You will smile with just the right blend of mystery and modesty. You will laugh, politely, when one of the older gentlemen misquotes Byron. You will tilt your head when someone mentions the Queen's latest health. And you will endure the unspoken gazes, the ones that skim your collarbone like a second corset, the ones that calculate your dowry behind mild eyes. You're not here to eat, you are here to be consumed. The dining room glows with gaslight. The air is warm with roasted meats and polished silver, but your appetite is nowhere to be found. You sit in your designated place, hands folded lightly near your fork, spine aligned like you were trained from girlhood. A gentleman to your right asks how you find the weather lately. You say it's been mild, but the garden needs rain. He nods and does not remember your name. Across the table, someone mentions a recent play in London. You have read about it in the papers. You know the actress. You know the scandal. But you say nothing unless prompted. A woman who volunteers her opinion on theatre may soon be suspected of having thoughts about politics, and that, of course, would be unseemly. So instead, you smile and ask about his horses. He talks for 10 minutes. You cut your meat into small, precise bites and pretend to chew them. You do not finish the plate. You never do. Because eating, like everything else, is a performance. Too little, and you seem weak. Too much, and you seem coarse. And if you accidentally stain your bodice with gravy, well, you might as well propose to yourself because no one else will. The candles flicker. You feel a headache blooming behind your eyes, but you keep smiling. One of the older ladies down the table has applied too much rice powder. It cakes in the creases beside her mouth, and someone whispers about it behind a wine glass. A maid trips slightly while serving the fish. No one acknowledges her. You all pretend it didn't happen. Because dinner is a show, and the illusion must be preserved. Especially the illusion that the women at this table are not working. But you are. You're calculating your every gesture, your every word. You laugh in the right places, sip slowly, nod encouragingly, and answer questions with a kind of polished neutrality. Inside, you are somewhere else entirely. You remember hearing once that some women take arsenic pills, not just on the skin, but swallowed, to keep their complexion ghostly, their eyes bright, their weight down. They die slowly, of course, but gracefully. That seems to be the goal. After dessert, a custard you barely touch. You rise when the hostess gives the signal. The women retire to the drawing room. The men stay behind for cigars, brandy, and serious talk. You've never been invited to that part. In the drawing room, you settle once more into your chair. Someone begins to play the pianoforte. You know the song by heart. You hum it under your breath, softly enough to seem charming, but not so confidently as to overshadow the performer. No one claps. They never do. One woman brings out embroidery. Another begins a story about her cousin's engagement. You smile and pass the wine. You do not yawn. You do not slouch. You do not mention the stiffness in your neck or the cramp in your foot from shoes that are half a size too small. You're composed. You're charming. You're exhausted. But when the gentlemen re-enter, smelling of smoke and opinion, you smile again. You look up. You offer a quiet, glimmering version of yourself. The acceptable version. The beautiful surface. And they nod. As if they see you. They don't. They never do. The next morning arrives with the faint ache of yesterday's politeness still lodged between your temples. The scent of coal and starch hangs in the corridor. You move slowly, as if wading through velvet. It's another day, another set of expectations. But this one comes with a different costume. Today, you are charitable. It's written into your week like scripture. Thursday mornings, charity visits. Friday afternoons, sewing circle for orphans. Saturday, perhaps, collecting for the Society for the Relief of Distressed Gentlewomen. The names change, the suffering doesn't. You dress modestly but tastefully, because appearance is part of the virtue. No silk today, too worldly. No pearls, too proud. You choose a grey walking dress with a sober bonnet and gloves that have been cleaned, not new. Your maid nods approvingly. You look suitably kind. Kindness, after all, is a performance too. You step into the carriage clutching a parcel of biscuits and hand-me-downs. You're on your way to do good. The street outside smells of wet stone and horse manure. You try not to breathe too deeply as the carriage rattles toward the poorer quarter. The air there is different, thicker, heavier, full of smoke from 10,000 chimneys and the scent of bread that never quite finishes baking. Children in bare feet dart between carts. Women with shawls pulled tight around their heads carry pails of water up endless stairs. You glance through the window, careful not to stare. Your heart aches, but you tell yourself, this visit matters. You're bringing light. You arrive at a mission house run by the Ladies' Benevolent Association. Inside, it smells of soap and desperation. Other women from your circle are already there, standing in clusters like lilies in a field of thorns. Mrs. Harrow hands you a clipboard. If you could help with distribution, she says. Her tone implies that you might otherwise be idle. You move to the long table where piles of clothing await judgment. You pick up a skirt, patched twice, thin as paper, and fold it carefully. A young mother approaches, her face drawn but proud. She asks softly if she may have one for her daughter. You nod, but Mrs. Harrow shakes her head. We'll see if she's suitable first. The woman flushes, murmurs an apology, and backs away. You feel something twist in your stomach. You're supposed to feel righteous. Instead, you feel small, but you say nothing. This is how charity works here. Not as mercy, but as management. The poor must behave to deserve aid. They must smile, curtsy, thank. Their gratitude must be visible, tidy, photogenic, well, sketch-worthy, since photographs are for the rich. And your role is to witness it all, to prove that goodness exists, that the system works, that your conscience is intact. You hand a loaf of bread to a child with dirt on her cheeks. She takes it, wide-eyed, and says nothing. You smile, the kind of smile that aches behind the teeth. God bless you, you whisper. But as she runs back to her mother, you catch the look the woman gives you. It isn't gratitude, it's pity. You try not to think about it. Because if you do, if you really let yourself feel the imbalance, you might not be able to continue smiling at all. So you straighten the pile of clothing, retie the ribbons around the parcels, and tell yourself you've done your part. You've given. You've cared. You've helped. Haven't you? The day stretches long in the mission house, the kind of weary length that feels like penance. You distribute bread, sort garments, murmur polite condolences to women whose names you forget the instant they curtsy. Around you, the other ladies chatter softly about concerts and recipes. The word hunger never passes anyone's lips. When the baskets are finally empty, the air feels lighter, not because the work is done, because the spectacle is. One by one, the women file out, clutching parcels and promises. A few linger, as if to thank you, but most hurry away. They have lives to resume. You have none to return to, not really. Mrs. Harrow suggests a cup of tea before you leave. You accept. The tea is tepid, the biscuits stale. Still, she beams with satisfaction. It's such a comfort, she sighs, to know we've done good work. You nod, smiling at your own reflection in the fogged window. You look pious, useful, redeemed. But you can't shake the feeling that something is terribly wrong with this version of mercy, this quiet, genteel hunger for other people's pain. The truth is, charity has become a pastime, a replacement for purpose. The same way embroidery fills empty hours, philanthropy fills empty meaning. The poor are props in your story of virtue. They appear, they suffer, they thank, they vanish. On the carriage ride home, the city blurs by. Chimneys, soot, thin faces at windows. You imagine for a moment stepping out into that other world, walking until your shoes wear through, living without mirrors or manners, just breathing unobserved. But then the thought passes, smothered under layers of silk and duty. You arrive home just before dusk. The house smells faintly of polish and roses. The maid takes your cloak. You should feel accomplished. Instead, you feel like you've just returned from a theatre production in which everyone played their role too well. Upstairs, in your writing room, you open your notebook. You mean to jot down your impressions, something about the virtue of service, perhaps a quote about Christian compassion. But your hand stalls. The words that come out are not pious. They are questions. What if kindness were quiet and unseen? What if help didn't need witnesses? What if charity weren't a ladder between the classes, but a bridge? You close the notebook quickly. Dangerous thoughts, these. Better to keep them private. Better to be thought kind than to risk being thought strange. Downstairs, the evening bell rings. Dinner is served. You smooth your skirts, check your reflection, and descend the stairs with perfect poise. You will smile when asked about your day. You will say the poor are grateful. You will say it felt good to give, because that's what's expected. That's what's safe. And later, when the house grows quiet and everyone sleeps, you will sit by the window and think of the woman's eyes, the one who pitied you, the one who saw through the lace, the one who knew that good deeds done for appearance are not goodness at all, but vanity dressed as virtue. You will not forget her, not tonight, not ever. Night has settled over the city, and the gas lamps flicker faintly against the damp windows. You've changed into your evening gown, the one that cinches a little tighter at the ribs, though you hardly notice anymore. You've been trained not to. Dinner was the same as always. Mild food, mild talk, mild laughter. But tonight your husband seemed distant. Not cold, never cold, just distracted. His gaze lingering on the brandy more than on you. His voice softer when speaking to the widow seated opposite. You tell yourself not to mind. That's what every married woman tells herself in this house, on this street, in this century. You smile, you nod, you keep your voice even. After all, your purpose now is stability, appearances, respectability, and love, if it ever existed, is a private thing, meant to be remembered, not expected. Later, when you retire to your dressing room, you unpin your hair and glance at the mirror. There you are. Still young enough to be looked at, but not so young as to be forgiven. You touch your cheek, still smooth beneath the candlelight, and wonder when it began. This quiet exhaustion you wear like an undergarment no one sees. You remember your wedding morning. The bells, the silk, the thrill of stepping into a carriage with flowers at your feet. You remember thinking, this is the start of everything. You were right, in a way. It was the start of learning just how small a life could be when shared with someone who never asked about your dreams. You didn't expect romance to last forever. No one does. But you thought companionship might. A husband who reads beside you, who listens, who sees. Instead, he sees through you, past you, toward the smoke curling from his cigar. You've learned not to ask questions. Victorian wives don't. When a man stays late at the club, you're supposed to be grateful. He's among his peers. When he leaves town for business, you're to wave from the doorway, smile on your face, handkerchief in hand. When he returns smelling faintly of perfume that isn't yours, you simply ask, "Was your journey pleasant?" No one talks about it. But every woman knows. Infidelity is like the fog. It drifts in, seeps through cracks, and lingers even after the fire's been stoked. It's not scandalous unless someone speaks of it. Silence keeps it respectable. There are women who look the other way and women who lose their minds trying not to. You are somewhere in between. You write in your diary instead. Never names, never dates. Just words like emptiness, aching, cold. And sometimes when you're brave, I miss myself. Once you considered speaking to the doctor. Not about your husband, of course, but about your sleeplessness, your fatigue, the grey fog that never quite lifts. He would have prescribed rest, maybe a change of air, perhaps a female tonic with brandy and laudanum, the cure for everything and nothing. But you didn't go, because deep down you already know what ails you. It's not nerves, it's not faintness, it's the slow erosion of a self that was never allowed to fully exist. You blow out the candle beside the mirror and stand in the quiet. In another room, your husband snores faintly. You wonder if he dreams of anything? You do. You dream of air, of laughter without permission, of waking up one morning and feeling entirely blessedly real. You lie awake longer than you should, the ceiling above you dim and endless. The clock ticks like a pulse, soft but relentless. Each sound seems to measure something. Your patience, your quiet, your life. You roll onto your side and watch the faint glow from the hallway creep across the rug. The house is still, except for the soft murmur of pipes and the faraway clink of glass from the parlour, where your husband sometimes finishes his brandy alone. You used to wait for him. At first, out of affection. Later, out of duty. Now, out of nothing at all. When he does come up, it's always the same. The soft creak of the door, the smell of tobacco and liquor, the careful avoidance of your eyes. He sits on the edge of the bed, removes his shoes, says something like, "Long day." You nod. You murmur, "Of course." There is no anger between you, only politeness, that most efficient kind of distance. You used to think intimacy meant hands and warmth and laughter, but in this world, intimacy means endurance. Two people breathing the same stale air, preserving the illusion of harmony because the alternative would scandalize the neighbors. Sometimes, after he falls asleep, you study his face by the light of the dying candle, the lines at the corners of his mouth, the grey threaded through his hair. You wonder if he ever looks at you when you're not aware. You suspect not. Your own reflection has become your only confidant. The mirror listens, at least. It doesn't interrupt, doesn't dismiss, doesn't sigh when you speak too long. You rise quietly and cross the room, wrapping a shawl around your shoulders. The night air is cold. You open the diary you hide beneath your sewing basket and dip your pen into the inkwell. The nib trembles slightly as you write. He smiled at Mrs. Linton tonight. She laughed too loudly. I said nothing. You pause. You stare at the ink spreading into the fibres of the page. You cross the line out. Then you write again. I said nothing because no one listens. You close the book. You never sign your name. It's safer that way. Safer to let the thoughts float unclaimed, as if someone else had written them. You think about the other wives you know, how Mrs. Pembroke takes laudanum in tea, how Miss Carroway feigns illness every third week so she can spend a day in bed reading secretly, how Mrs. Hartley has started volunteering at the parish just to feel useful. None of you are saints. None of you are sinners. You're all women surviving within narrow walls, each finding small, invisible ways to resist suffocation. Your rebellion is silence. Your weapon is composure. Your secret is that you're not entirely broken yet. Downstairs, a clock chimes midnight. You blow out the candle and slip back into bed beside the man who never really knew you. He stirs, half asleep, murmurs your name as if remembering a dream. You close your eyes. You almost answer. But instead, you let the darkness answer for you. It does so gently, without judgment. And for the first time in days, you sleep. Morning again. The same light, the same chill, the same rhythm of footsteps in the hall. But beneath the quiet, something hums differently. An unease you can't name, like a curtain slightly stirring when all the windows are closed. You dress slowly. The maid laces your corset, her fingers quick, her face expressionless. You watch her in the mirror and wonder, as you often do, what she thinks when she looks at you. She doesn't meet your eyes. None of them do. But she knows things, more than you'll ever admit. She's seen the stains on the table linens, the tears on your pillowcases, the little tremors in your hands. Servants always know. They're trained to see without reacting. Downstairs, the house is already alive. The cook bangs pans in the kitchen. Someone is sweeping the corridor. Somewhere a baby cries. Your neighbour's, not yours. You can tell from the sound. You descend the stairs, gloved and polished, stepping carefully to avoid the faint creak of the third step. Your husband is gone already, his walking stick and hat missing from their stand. The butler nods. He's gone into town, madam. Of course he has. You enter the breakfast room, but the smell of yesterday's fire and this morning's bacon feels suffocating. You can't sit still, so you wander. Through the parlour, past the portraits, into the back hallway. You stop at the servants' door. The hum of life is louder here. Clinking dishes, hurried whispers, the rush of boiling water. You've been told never to linger too long beyond this door. It upsets the order of things. But you hover anyway. You hear laughter. Not the tight, polite laughter of your drawing room. Real laughter. Breathless, raw, alive. For a moment you envy it. Then you hear a different sound. A muffled sob coming from the washroom beyond. You hesitate, then push the door open just a few inches. A scullery maid, no more than 16, is kneeling on the floor, scrubbing a copper pot so hard her knuckles have split. She doesn't look up. You say softly, "Are you hurt?" She jumps, startled, and hides her hands behind her apron. "No, ma'am, just clumsy." Her voice wavers. You recognize it, the tone of someone terrified of consequence. You glance around. The tiles are slick with suds, the air heavy with heat and steam. You see her reflection in the basin water. Eyes red, shoulders trembling, her blouse damp with sweat. You know this exhaustion. You know this silence. It's a different form but the same disease. For a moment you want to say something human, something kind, but the words lodge in your throat. You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to see this. So instead you murmur, "Be careful with that soap. It burns the skin." She nods quickly, grateful but wary. You turn and leave. Back in the hall, the quiet feels heavier than before. You realise that beneath all the embroidered civility, your entire home runs on invisible pain, on people who must never be tired, who must never cry, who must never exist outside their usefulness. And you are one of them too. Your dress is finer, your hands softer, but you're no freer than the girl in the scullery. Both of you are trapped by expectation, one of labour, one of propriety, both punished for slipping out of the role. You stand there, heart pounding faintly, until the butler appears at the end of the hall. He bows. "Madam, the coal delivery has arrived." And just like that, the moment ends. You nod, smile, return to the drawing room. By the time you sit down again, your face has returned to its practiced calm. But your hands, they're trembling slightly. You hide them beneath your gloves. The day unfolds in perfect, suffocating order. The servants scurry. The bell rings. The house hums like a great clock wound too tightly. And you, the lady of it all, are its quiet pendulum, swinging, polished, necessary. You spend an hour sorting correspondence, another answering none of it. You pace the length of the parlour once, twice, again. You adjust the curtains, though the light was fine. It isn't the fabric that's the problem, it's the stillness. Something in the air feels bruised. You think of the girl in the scullery, her split knuckles, the way she hid her pain like it was shameful. You could almost feel the heat of that room still clinging to your skin. But what haunts you most is not her exhaustion. It's your helplessness. You had every power but the one that mattered. To change anything. You try to banish the thought. Women in your position aren't meant to dwell on servants' lives. It's unhealthy, your mother once said, to let compassion turn into distraction. A household must have boundaries, she told you, or it will dissolve into chaos. But you're starting to suspect the chaos is already there, only better hidden. This house is a stage. Upstairs you play the angel of composure. Downstairs they play the ghosts who keep it shining. And every day the curtain between your worlds grows thinner. You remember something the cook once muttered when she thought you were out of earshot. We work to make them spotless, and they still see dirt. You hadn't understood it then. You do now. You pour yourself tea, but your hands shake just enough to rattle the cup against the saucer. A tiny sound, but in this silence, it's thunder. You take a sip anyway, hoping the heat steadies you. It doesn't. Across the room, you notice a streak of soot on the wall, just beside the fireplace. It will bother you all day. You consider calling for the maid to scrub it, but the thought of her raw hands against the lime wash makes you set the bell aside. You'll do it yourself, you think. Later, when no one sees. When did you start hiding kindness like contraband? The answer comes easily. Around the same time you learn that pity, spoken aloud, is social suicide. There are women who don't learn this lesson. Mrs. Linton, for one. She once paid for a servant's sick child to see a doctor, and the gossip hasn't stopped since. So sentimental, they whispered. So unwise. As if tenderness were a contagion. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere a baby cries again, the same one as before. Somewhere a clock chimes deep and hollow. The sound rolls through the house, through your bones. For a moment you imagine you can hear the rhythm of all those unseen hands, scrubbing, folding, chopping, polishing, moving in time with it. That you think is the true heartbeat of this world. Not love, not prayer, not gentility, labour, unpaid, unseen, unending, and yet you are part of it. You host it. You depend on it. You wonder if that makes you complicit, or simply another cog polished and perfumed to hide the same grind. Outside, the carriage wheels rattle along the cobblestones. A dog barks. The city exhales its smoke into the dimming sky. You stand, walk to the window, and rest your hand against the glass. Down below, a maid hurries across the courtyard, carrying a bucket too heavy for her frame. The weight pulls her sideways, but she keeps moving. You could call to her, offer to help, ask her name. You don't. Instead, you whisper to the reflection staring back at you. We're both carrying something, aren't we? And then, because it's all you can do, you step away from the glass before someone sees. The next morning begins with a note. Folded, cream-coloured, faintly scented with something that used to be expensive. It's from Mrs. Winthrop, announcing a ladies' social meeting. The kind of gathering that pretends to be about art but is really about power. You know this before you even finish the first sentence. You'll attend, of course. You always do. It's not about friendship. It's about visibility. Absence is suspicious. Presence, even silent, keeps you in the circle. The meeting will be held at her home on St. John's Terrace, a mansion known for its chandelier and its chill. You dress accordingly, something refined but not ostentatious. Pale blue, with lace cuffs that suggest humility while whispering expense. The carriage ride there feels longer than usual. The city rolls past, a grey quilt of chimney smoke, laundry lines, and the occasional black umbrella. It's raining lightly, and every street smells faintly of coal and cabbage. When you arrive, the drawing room is already crowded with women. Silk rustles, fans flutter, laughter ripples through the air like perfume. A footman takes your cloak and you step into the performance once more. The topic of the day is the advancement of the female mind. You almost laugh. You've heard this play before. It's a careful kind of rebellion, the kind that keeps one foot firmly inside the parlour. Mrs. Winthrop herself begins, voice smooth as syrup. We ladies, though delicate, are not without influence. Through virtue, taste, and tact, we can elevate society. The room hums with nods. Everyone agrees. Everyone must. But then Mrs. Grafton, sharp-eyed, thin-lipped, never quite fashionable, dares to say, and perhaps in time we may deserve the vote as well. The silence that follows could curdle cream. Mrs. Winthrop's smile freezes. Ah, she says finally, let us not stray into politics. We must not forget our natural grace. You lower your gaze, though your pulse quickens, not from fear, from something closer to recognition, because grace, that word again, is the leash dressed up as virtue. You listen as the discussion shifts to safer ground. Moral literature, good manners, proper education for daughters, each phrase like a step back from the edge. Every time the conversation inches toward equality, someone smothers it with lace. You sip your tea. You nod at the right times. But inside something is stirring. It's small, almost imperceptible, like the first crack in porcelain. A thought that doesn't belong here. A question that doesn't have permission to exist. What if grace isn't goodness? What if obedience isn't virtue? What if all this politeness, these endless hours of careful speech and careful dress, are not protection, but prison? The thought terrifies you, not because it's wrong, but because it feels true. You glance across the room. Mrs. Grafton meets your eyes, just for a second. A flicker of understanding passes between you, a brief, silent acknowledgement that neither of you believes in this play anymore, and then it's gone. Mrs. Winthrop calls for applause. Everyone claps. You do too. But your hands feel cold. On the carriage ride home, the rain has stopped, but the streets are slick with reflected light. You stare out the window at the wet cobblestones, at the blurred silhouettes of women hurrying through the drizzle, and you think, maybe something is changing, quietly, beneath all the ribbons and the sermons. Maybe it begins like this, a single question you can't quite unthink. That night, the question won't leave you alone. It follows you up the stairs, into the soft-lit safety of your room, into the mirror as you unpin your hair. What if grace isn't goodness? What if this entire life, this delicate dance of appearances and gestures, has nothing to do with virtue at all, and everything to do with control? You sit before the dressing mirror, the lamplight catching on the silver comb in your hand. Your reflection looks back, perfect as always, but your face feels unfamiliar, like someone you've been performing for years and can't quite remember how to stop playing. You recall Mrs. Grafton's voice, calm, brave, too bold for the room. You remember the way every pair of eyes turned on her, as if she'd said something profane. You wonder what it cost her to speak that sentence aloud. You imagine her carriage ride home, her husband waiting with questions, her neighbours whispering, the invitations that might not come next week. And still, she said it. You envy her for that. You rise and cross to the writing desk lit by one flickering candle. You open your notebook, the same one you've been filling quietly for months, and dip your pen in ink. This time, you don't hesitate. What if we stopped calling obedience grace? What if silence were not peace, but punishment? What if goodness meant something freer than this? The words come faster than you expect. They pour out steady, controlled, but burning at the edges. You don't write names. You don't write plans. You only write the truth as you've begun to feel it. You pause. The house creaks faintly. You hear your husband's footsteps somewhere down the hall. You blow on the ink until it dries, then close the notebook and slide it into the false bottom of your sewing box. If anyone found it, you'd be finished. A woman with thoughts too large for her life is a danger to herself and others. You'd be dismissed as fanciful, hysterical, discontented, whatever word makes them most comfortable. You smile at the absurdity of it. The same society that applauds a woman for stitching flowers on linen fears her if she dares to stitch a sentence instead. You stand and cross to the window. The city outside hums faintly, gas lamps glowing through the fog. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, a train whistles, a reminder that the world is moving, even if your own life stands still. You rest your forehead against the cool glass and breathe. It's frightening, this shift inside you, but it's also electric, like waking from a dream you didn't know you were in. You think of all the other women, Mrs. Grafton with her sharp eyes, the governess with her ink-stained fingers, the maid with her raw hands, and wonder if they feel it too. This slow, rising tremor beneath the fabric of their days. You whisper softly, maybe one day. The words fog the glass, then vanish. Behind you, the clock strikes 10. You turn off the lamp, slip into bed. Your husband is already asleep, mouth slightly open, the scent of brandy still clinging faintly to him. You pull the covers up to your chin and close your eyes. For the first time in years, your last thought before sleep isn't about appearances, it's about possibility, and that you realize is its own quiet revolution. The next morning dawns pale and thin, as if the sun itself hesitates to commit. You wake before the servant's bell, mind already restless, the echo of last night's thoughts still humming faintly under your ribs. You try to follow routine, dress, wash, compose yourself. But every movement feels like imitation, a faint replay of a life that's begun to slip slightly out of focus. You keep catching yourself, pausing, staring, wondering. The questions you wrote last night are still waiting, tucked inside your sewing box. You can almost feel them there, pulsing like a small heartbeat in the quiet. Over breakfast, the world appears unchanged. The marmalade glistens, the silver gleams, the newspaper lies folded beside your husband's cup. But when he clears his throat and begins to read aloud, something about a speech in Parliament, you hear it differently this morning. He reads with the authority of a man who assumes his words are truth. You sip your tea and let your gaze rest on the paper, not the print but the spaces between it, the blankness that holds all the things not said. You imagine suddenly what it would be like if women's names filled those spaces, not as wives or benefactors or anonymous contributors, but as voices, loud, messy, real. You almost laugh at yourself. The thought feels dangerous, even here, across the breakfast table from a man who wouldn't call it danger at all, just nonsense. He folds the paper, takes another sip and says absently, "Mrs. Winthrop's speech was well received yesterday, I hear. A sensible woman, that one. You nearly choke on your tea. Sensible. The word lands like a stone. He means it kindly, of course. Sensible is the highest praise for a woman in your world. It means safe, predictable, contained. A woman who will never cause a ripple. You murmur agreement, though your heart rebels. Because you've begun to see what happens to sensible women. They vanish into their manners. They shrink until they fit perfectly into the frame society built for them, and then they disappear behind it altogether. You glance toward the window where the fog has thickened into a grey wall. Somewhere out there, the factory whistles are sounding. Somewhere, girls your age are walking to work, shawls wrapped tight, breath rising in white clouds. They are not free, not truly, but they are visible. They exist in the world's noise, not its silence. You envy them. After your husband leaves for the club, you walk through the house. The floors creak beneath your slippers. The portraits on the walls seem to watch you, their painted faces frozen in centuries of correctness. You stop in front of one, your grandmother, painted before her marriage. She looks fierce, almost defiant, chin lifted, eyes clear. You've always been told she was spirited. It was said with disapproval, but you see it differently now. You think perhaps she wasn't tamed so much as buried, and that realization lights something small and dangerous inside you. You go to the piano and lift the lid. Your fingers hover above the keys. You haven't played in weeks. Not properly. Music has always felt indulgent, but now it feels like survival. You press one note, then another. Slowly, sound fills the air. A minor melody, low and trembling, but alive. The maid passes the doorway, pauses for half a second to listen, then moves on. You keep playing. You don't care if the sound carries through the house. You don't care if someone hears. You're not performing. Not tonight. For the first time, you're playing for yourself. The melody swells, uneven at first. Your fingers stiff, hesitant. But soon something unlocks. The music begins to pour out of you, trembling and alive, rolling through the drawing room in waves. It's clumsy, imperfect, human, but it's yours. For a moment you forget where you are. You forget the walls, the rules, the weight of the corset against your ribs. There's only rhythm, breath, sound. You feel your heart keeping time, wild and unrestrained, as if it's been waiting years to be heard. You close your eyes and lean into it. But then, footsteps. The music halts mid-phrase. The silence returns, sharp and immediate. Your fingers freeze above the keys. It's your husband. He stands in the doorway, hat still in hand, expression unreadable. "I thought you didn't play in the mornings," he says lightly, though his tone carries an edge you recognize too well. "I felt like it," you answer, softly. He glances toward the window, as though the sound might have disturbed the neighbours. "It's rather loud," he says after a pause. "You'll wake the house." You want to laugh, to tell him the house has been awake for years, winding itself around both of you, polite and airless and full of ghosts, but you only lower your gaze and nod. "Of course," he smiles faintly, satisfied. "You know, I prefer you when you're quiet. You have a very tranquil nature." The words sting in the way only compliments can when they're meant to keep you small. He leaves the room soon after, and you sit there, hands still poised above the keys, the echo of the music fading. The silence feels heavier now, as though the walls have grown closer. You press one note, softly, then another. No melody this time, just defiance disguised as sound. After he's gone, you resume playing again, but quietly, so quietly that only you can hear. A secret conversation between you and the instrument, between you and the self you almost lost. When you finally stop, your fingers ache, but your chest feels different, lighter, looser, as though something deep inside has stretched awake. You rise from the piano bench and glance at your reflection in the window. The grey sky behind you looks almost silver now, the faintest shimmer of light breaking through. You realize suddenly that freedom doesn't have to arrive like thunder. It can start as something smaller, a note, a word, a thought you refuse to silence. That evening when the lamps are lit and the world folds itself neatly back into ritual, you open your sewing box and take out your notebook again. You flip to a blank page. No trembling this time. The pen feels steady in your hand. If I cannot speak loudly, I will write quietly, you begin. If I cannot leave, I will build a doorway in words. You pause. Then deliberately you write your own name beneath it. For once, you don't hide. You close the notebook, slide it beneath your pillow, and sit in the calm that follows. The faint smell of ink, the echo of distant rain, the lingering vibration of music on the air. All of it, the noise, the silence, the ache, feels different now. Not smaller, not endless, just alive. You smile. It's not a polite one, not practiced, not proper. It's real. And though the world around you hasn't changed, you have. The days that follow feel different. Not in the way that others would notice, but in the way you do. The air tastes sharper. The silence feels thinner, like fabric stretched just before it tears. You go about your routine as expected. Breakfast, correspondence, embroidery, calls. But beneath every motion hums a new awareness, a secret rhythm no one else seems to hear. It's like walking through the same rooms but suddenly noticing every locked door. Your husband doesn't sense the change. How could he? The rebellion you've begun is invisible. You still smile, still nod, still play your role perfectly. But every word you write now, every thought you refuse to silence, feels like a tiny spark in a paper house. This morning, while he discusses business with a visitor in the study, you slip upstairs with your notebook. The servants are busy. No one stops you. You close the door to your sitting room and open the window wide. The cold air rushes in, bringing with it the distant sound of carriage wheels and street vendors calling out prices. Life, real and unfiltered. You dip your pen and begin to write again. Not just thoughts this time, but sentences that move, that dare to argue. It cannot be virtue to erase oneself. It cannot be peace to live unseen. We call it grace because we have no other word for obedience dressed in silk. You pause, listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No knocking. Only the quiet scratch of your pen. You keep writing. You think about Mrs. Grafton again. The courage in her stillness. The way she looked at you across that crowded room as if she saw you truly for the first time. You wonder how many other women are hiding notebooks like yours scattered across the city, filled with words too dangerous to speak aloud. You imagine them, hidden inside sewing baskets, tucked behind hymnals, slipped between recipe cards, thoughts disguised as duty, hope disguised as habit. Perhaps you're not alone. Perhaps none of you are. You write faster now, ink blotting on your fingers. You don't care. If the world won't let us speak, we will whisper. If it forbids our presence, we will linger in the margins. And one day, they will find our words and realize we were here all along. You close the notebook and press your palm against the cover, feeling the faint warmth of your own pulse through it. You almost laugh at the audacity of what you've done. Nothing more than a few pages of ink, yet it feels like the first real thing you've ever made. Downstairs, the bell rings for luncheon. You rise, smooth your skirts, and glance around the room to make sure nothing looks amiss. To anyone else, everything appears the same. A tidy space, a polished desk, a respectable wife. But you know the truth now. You've built something they can't see, an invisible life within the visible one. As you descend the stairs, the maid greets you with a quiet nod. You catch her eye for a moment, longer than usual. She looks startled, then smiles back. A real smile. The kind you haven't shared with anyone in months. For a brief second, you feel it. That bridge you once imagined between the worlds above and below the stairs. Two women, different cages, one understanding. At the table, your husband looks up from the newspaper. "You're cheerful today," he says, half surprised. "I suppose I am," you answer, taking your seat. He doesn't ask why. He never would. But for once you're glad. You want this secret untouched. A small glowing ember hidden under layers of silk and etiquette. It's not freedom yet, but it's the beginning of one. That night, when the house finally settles into its usual hush, you sit by the faint glow of a single candle, notebook in your lap, heartbeat steady but bright. You're not hiding now, you're creating. You've started to imagine what these words could become if they ever left this room. Maybe not a book, maybe not even a letter. Perhaps just a whisper that finds another woman's ear. Something that says, "You're not mad, you're not alone, it's the world that's too small." You trace the edge of the page, fingertips smudged faintly with ink. There's power in this smudge, you think. A mark of your own making, unapproved and uncorrected. Outside, a carriage rattles past, wheels slick against the cobblestones. Somewhere in the distance, church bells ring the hour. You think of all the women hearing the same bells, counting the same hours, wondering when, if ever, their lives will begin belonging to them. The thought steadies you. You turn the page and begin again. They tell us that our purpose is to preserve the peace of men. But peace built on silence is not peace. It's a cage. They tell us to be grateful, graceful, good. But goodness without freedom is obedience wearing a ribbon. The words feel dangerous, like stolen fire. You don't stop. You keep going until the candle burns low and your fingers cramp. The room smells faintly of wax and rebellion. Then you hear it. Footsteps in the corridor. Your husband's, heavy and deliberate. You snap the notebook shut and slide it beneath a folded shawl just as the door opens. He appears, already in his dressing gown, brows raised. Still awake? You smile faintly. Couldn't sleep. He chuckles, the sound soft but patronizing. Too much thinking will ruin your rest. You know that, my dear. I know, you reply, voice smooth as the surface of your tea. He kisses the top of your head, lightly, distractedly, and leaves again. The door closes, the air shifts. You wait a full minute before exhaling. You retrieve the notebook, heart still thudding, and tuck it deeper into its hiding place. You'll keep writing tomorrow, and the next day. You don't know what it will amount to, or if anyone will ever read it. But it doesn't matter. You've begun. In the mirror across the room, you catch your reflection. The faint gleam of candlelight flickering over your face. You look neither fragile nor fearful now. You look awake. It's startling, that realization. To see yourself as something more than decoration. More than a role. You whisper softly into the quiet. They will never know me. It isn't despair this time. It's defiance. Because now you do. Tomorrow you'll still smile at the breakfast table. You'll still pour tea, still nod, still listen. But every gesture will carry a secret weight. A private history. A reminder that while they believe you docile, you are busy building something no one can erase. The world outside may never read your words. But one day, someone will find them. In a chest, or a drawer, or beneath a cracked floorboard. And realize that even within the strictest walls, women were thinking, dreaming, writing. And maybe, when that day comes, they'll understand. History wasn't made only by those who spoke loudly. It was kept alive by those who whispered. You blow out the candle. The smoke curls upward, faint and fragrant. In the darkness, the quiet feels full, not empty. You close your eyes. You're no longer just existing. You are becoming. The days pass in their usual rhythm, calls, letters, polite conversation. But something inside you hums differently now. The old silence no longer feels like safety. It feels like sleep. And you have begun, very quietly, to wake. It begins with small acts. You start to speak a little more plainly at luncheons. When someone remarks that women are too sensitive for politics, you let your smile falter just enough to make them uncomfortable. You stop apologizing when you take the last scone. You stop lowering your gaze when men speak over you. They notice. Not all at once, but gradually, like birds startled from a field. Mrs. Winthrop comments that you seem brisk lately, her voice sharp beneath the sugar. Another lady calls you independent, which sounds like both a compliment and a warning. You pretend not to hear either, but inside you feel something fierce bloom, a spark of satisfaction. You've started writing every day now, not only at night but sometimes in the mornings, before the house stirs. You write in code, little fragments disguised as prayers or grocery lists, phrases that mean nothing to anyone else. 3 apples for the market really means 3 thoughts that scare me but must be written. Your words are spreading across the pages faster than you can contain them. Sometimes they frighten you, sometimes they steady you. Always, they remind you that you exist. One afternoon, Mrs. Grafton calls unexpectedly. The maid announces her with a note of surprise. You haven't seen her since the advancement of the female mind meeting, where she nearly started a revolution with 1 sentence. She enters your drawing room with quiet confidence, rain still beading on her cloak. You offer tea, but she waves it away. "I didn't come for tea," she says softly. Her eyes flick toward the writing desk, then back to you. "Do you still think about that day?" You nod. She smiles faintly. "So do I. I thought I was the only one." The 2 of you speak cautiously at first, circling around the forbidden subject. But soon the air thickens with honesty. You talk about reading, about loneliness, about the way women's lives are curated like exhibits. You talk about the ache of wanting something you can't quite name. It feels dangerous, this conversation, like walking along the edge of a cliff, but also intoxicating. Mrs. Grafton leans forward, her voice dropping. "I've been meeting with a few women, quietly, to discuss education reform, writing classes. Nothing radical, of course." Her eyes sparkle with irony. You both know that in this world, a woman reading the wrong book is radical enough. You hesitate. The words yes and no fight in your throat. Finally you ask, "Do you think it's safe?" She smiles, just barely. "No, but that's not the same as impossible." The sentence hangs between you like a lantern. When she leaves an hour later, your pulse is still racing. You stand by the door long after her carriage has gone, fingers pressed to the wood as if trying to hold on to the moment. Safe and impossible. You whisper the words to yourself again. They sound like a choice. That evening you take out your notebook and write a new line, different from all the others. Not observation, not reflection, but intention. "I will not spend my life waiting to be permitted." You underline it once, then close the book. You have no idea what you'll do next. But for the first time, that uncertainty feels like freedom, not fear. The next morning arrives soft and grey. A low fog curls along the street, muffling sound and softening the edges of everything. You sit by the window in your robe, tea cooling beside you, notebook open. The ink gleams wetly in the early light. You read over what you wrote last night. "I will not spend my life waiting to be permitted." The words look both fragile and certain, like a bridge made of glass. But as you trace them with your fingertip, you feel something steady form beneath the fear. Resolve. You don't need to make speeches or break doors to change things. You can start small, the way every real revolution begins, in whispers. When your husband appears in the doorway, you close the notebook calmly. He asks if you're coming to breakfast. You nod. He doesn't notice the ink stain on your hand. At the table, he talks about markets and railways. You listen politely, but your mind hums elsewhere. When he asks if you'll be home this afternoon, you answer honestly, "No." He looks up, surprised. "No?" "I'm visiting Mrs. Grafton," you say, tone mild but firm. "She's starting a reading circle." He frowns slightly, as if the idea doesn't fit into his world's geometry. "For what purpose?" "To read," you say simply, meeting his eyes, "and to think." The silence that follows feels like a test, but you don't fill it. You've learned that silence can be a weapon too. After a moment he shrugs. "Well, so long as it's respectable." You smile, a small private smile, and finish your tea. Respectable. How generous that word sounds when spoken by someone who never has to earn it. Later, as the carriage rattles toward Mrs. Grafton's house, the city feels almost alive again. The rain has stopped. Market women shout prices from beneath striped awnings. A boy runs past with a bundle of papers, ink fresh on his fingers. You wonder if your words could ever travel like that, beyond walls, beyond whispers. When you arrive, there are only 4 women gathered around the fire. They greet you cautiously, with the kind of warmth that hides its flame until it's sure it's safe to burn. On the table before them lie books, some poetry, some essays, one well-worn copy of A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. You pick it up. The cover is soft from handling, the margins filled with pencil marks. You glance up. "You've all read this?" Mrs. Grafton nods. "We're reading it again." You sit. You open the book. The pages whisper faintly as you turn them. As you begin to read aloud, something inside you settles. For the first time, your voice sounds like it belongs in the room. The others listen, not as though you're breaking a rule, but as though you're joining a chorus that's been waiting centuries to be heard. You don't know what will come of this. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. But you can feel it. The world shifting by inches. One woman's breath at a time. Later that evening, when you return home, you open your notebook once more. You write slowly, deliberately, savouring the words. "Today I spoke without permission, and the sky did not fall." You close the book and slip it beneath your pillow again. The air smells faintly of rain and ink. You lie back and listen to the city breathing beyond your window, the carriages, the bells, the soft murmur of a world that has no idea what's coming. And you smile, because you do. The house is dark now. The city too. All the noise and ritual of the day has folded itself into a gentle, breathing silence. You rest there, the ghost of ink still on your fingertips, the whisper of words still humming somewhere beneath your heartbeat. Outside, a lamp flickers in the mist. Inside, the clock ticks on, but softly now, less a demand, more a lullaby. You think of the women you've met, the governess with ink-stained hands, the maid with blistered fingers, Mrs. Grafton's steady eyes. You think of every quiet rebellion that filled a diary, every forbidden sentence that refused to die, every act of grace that was really courage in disguise. And you know, now, that you belong to them. Not by blood, but by persistence. By the quiet, steady pulse of thought that no corset, no etiquette, no century could fully silence. You let the stillness settle over you, heavy but kind. The kind of quiet that feels earned. The night deepens. The rain begins again, soft against the glass. You imagine the ink in your notebook drying completely, your words safe and waiting. Someday, perhaps, someone will find them. Maybe a daughter, or a stranger, or a woman centuries from now who recognizes herself in your voice. You hope she does. You close your eyes. The room fades, the world softens, and all that remains is the rhythm of breath, the pulse of possibility. The story isn't finished, but for now, it can rest.